Good morning, everyone. My name is Jessica Vella, and I'm the Project and Events Coordinator with the Office of Strategic Initiatives and External Relations here at Centennial College. I'll be one of the moderators for today's event, along with Magdalena, who you will hear from later today. Welcome, and thank you for joining us for the CoShaping the Workforce Succeeding on Your Career Journey virtual event. This event is hosted in partnership by Centennial's Leadership Academy and Solve Sector Sessions, or SX3 for short. This is also the signature event for Centennial College's Career Week. Today's event is an opportunity to not just learn strategies and tools from our expert speakers. By joining, you have taken a step towards developing yourself into the leader our workforce needs. Through continual learning, we all can play a vital role in shaping a stronger and resilient workforce. Before we start this morning's presentations, I would like to begin with a few housekeeping items. A collaborative and successful workforce requires good communication. We encourage you all to join the conversation online by tweeting at us using the hashtag CareerWeekCC. Our event moderator will post the hashtag in the chat for your reference. Zoom has a closed captioning feature. If you would like to utilize it, please click on the CC button along your Zoom toolbar to enable this option. Please note that we will be recording this event for internal documentation purposes. And lastly, please use the chat function for general comments and the Q&A box specifically if you have questions for our speakers. We will have moderators monitoring the chat and will flag any discussion questions for our speakers to answer. I would now like to introduce our MC for this morning, Dr. Neil Bedell. Dr. Neil Bedell became VP Student Success at Centennial College in January 2020. He served students since 2001 through residence, career, and academic positions at the Universities of Alberta, Guelph, Toronto, and McMaster, and a Dean of Students at Centennial since 2014. Dr. Bedell completed his PhD at the University of Alberta, and his research focused on critically exploring storied social class experiences of first-generation students. He has presented and published to advance student inclusion, served as an adjunct professor at U of T's Ontario Institute for Studies in Education, and is recognized as a notable contributor in the broader student affairs field. Thank you and welcome, Dr. Neil Bedell.
And Jess, thank you so much for that introduction. And more importantly, welcome to everyone who is here today that has taken the time to join us on this gorgeous day where we are so blessed to have a double-digit temperature in November. So Centennial College is proud to be part of a rich history of education in this province and in this city. We acknowledge that Centennial College is on the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and pay tribute to their legacy and the legacy of all First Peoples of Canada as we strengthen ties with the communities we serve and build the future through learning and through our graduates. Today, the traditional meeting place of Toronto is still home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work in the communities that have grown in the treaty lands of the Mississaugas. We acknowledge that we are all treaty people and accept our responsibility to honor all our relations. And this is our land acknowledgement, but it's so much more. And it was composed by Joseph McQuabbie and some other colleagues in connection with First Nations peoples. And Joseph McQuabbie recently passed away, and just wanted to share one of his calls was to always step up. And I think stepping up is so important right now as we're talking about the world of work, because part of stepping up is our obligation to all our relations, to uplift people, to uplift communities. And we really need to do that, particularly in this world of work where we're talking about career resilience in a context that is so disruptive. So just wanted to provide that invitation to step up for each other, particularly with respect to the world of work in this time of disruption, because it's such an important piece, particularly for our students. And so we recognize that folks are joining from everywhere in the world. And while we see this amazing different square configuration that is very Brady Bunch, you could be anywhere and everywhere, from maybe outside in your patio, maybe in the GTA, but maybe out of province. So I just wanted to get a sense of where folks are at. And so if you could please, in the chat, provide us with a sense of where you are. And what we will also do, recognizing that you are in many different places and many different traditional lands, is also include in the chat some links provided with respect to the traditional lands that you might be on. So today, we come together to talk about the evolution of the workplace and how we need to meet unprecedented challenges and opportunities. We must, as we're having conversations in an academic realm, continuously learn and grow throughout our life, whether we're in school, whether we're in the workplace, whether we're currently employed, whether we're close to retirement. We all have a role to play in shaping the workplace of the future and our community, going back to Joseph's words about stepping up for each other and for our communities. And since March 17th, specifically for Centennial College, when we pivoted to online, we've entered a new reality. And although this new reality may have already been written into our future to a certain extent, it came upon us quite suddenly and more than we were ready. And we've lived in this digital world for a while right now, but only recently has the world become the only way but only recently has this world become the only way many of us are able to search for work, interview, become employed, navigate, transition to work, and connect. It's the only vehicle that we have right now. And while there are many advantages to this world of work, for example, I recently moved, but I only had to unpack 5 articles of clothing because that is all I wear now. But it has come with some challenges because we are just not able to connect. And it's a cause of a lot of anxiety. This change is unprecedented. We've used that word a lot. It can be daunting. There's so much unknown, but there is so much opportunity. And we have amazing speakers today who are going to help us navigate this world of work and in this context. And I want to punctuate that, particularly for our Centennial College context, because what we've seen from students at Centennial is that most are communicating to us through surveys that mental health concerns, anxiety, depression, stress have increased. And we're seeing higher numbers. 74% have indicated increased mental health concerns following COVID. And this is consistent with what we're seeing across North America. There was a study published in University Affairs. 89% of students are indicating higher stress as a result of higher mental health concerns as a result of COVID. And another one published in the Journal of Medical Internet Research, where 71% indicated that increased level of mental health concerns. And a lot of it has to relate to the uncertainty, particularly with respect to foundations, particularly the importance of work within that context. And I was at a CCSAI meeting, the Centennial College Students Association Incorporated, and one student asked a question, and it landed, it shook, it was a very poignant question. And his question was simply this: will employers hire me? Will employers want me because now all of my experience is online, and will they value the abilities and the competencies and the knowledge that I have to bring because of this new way of engaging online? And so I'm painting that picture not to start off negatively, but to really punctuate the point that the collective call for our ability to really, going back to Joseph's words, uplift each other and uplift communities in order to thrive within this new world of work and this new reality is just so profound, and it is within us to do. And Centennial has always been amazingly student-centered. And so we have that strength to work from, and we're in this forum together with these amazing speakers. And so for the next 3 hours, we will learn from these industry experts who will share their thoughts on what new working world looks like and how it is likely to develop. And these folks are fantastic. They have an amazing background of experience, got to meet them. And they're also just really fun. So we will learn how to promote ourselves and get hired in a new virtual recruitment world. And we will also find out effective strategies for how to stay hired and become leaders in the workplace. A full morning dedicated to beneficial lessons. And it's so fantastic that you are here. And so what I would like to do now is transition to one of those fabulous people, and that is Perry Monaco, the Senior Manager of Customer Success at LinkedIn. Perry Monaco leads the customer success organization in North America for search and staffing segment at LinkedIn. His teams work with talent acquisition companies, building social media recruitment strategies while focusing on the end user to manage retention, customer experience, and account growth. Perry was one of the first 4.5 million members of LinkedIn, and that's an important point because now it is just so much more robust than that, and was previously a recruiter before helping to build the customer success practice at LinkedIn. Perry currently lives in the Greater Toronto area with his wife and 3 children and has an amazing background. You can see Kramer as one of his pictures. He also has amazing virtual backgrounds of superheroes. So Perry's keynote will leave you inspired about your career journey ahead. And as you can see, based on his experience, so targeted to navigating the virtual world. So you will likely take away many things, but what Perry's going to talk about are 3 things in particular: the state of the job market in today's COVID world, why social media is more like real life than you may have realized, and he will also offer some insight into his own tumultuous career journey. So be prepared to challenge yourself by asking the ultimate question for any job seeker: what do you want to be when you grow up? Perry, it's fantastic to have you with us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Tumultuous. I'm not sure if I use that word myself, but I would suggest that that maybe understates the career journey I've been on. It has been quite the ride. It's a pleasure to be here today. I've had a long relationship with Centennial way back, probably close to 10 years ago now. I've been at LinkedIn for 10 years, and I remember going in and speaking to business classes as far back as that point in time. So it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this wonderful morning. A couple of ground rules from my perspective. I'm at home, as you can tell. I'm in my bunker. I have finished my basement here probably about 10 years ago or so with no intention of ever working from it. And so I would have never thought that I would have this vanity wall behind me. These are pictures of myself running marathons. But clearly my ego doesn't think that that's too bad because I've kept them up. But I've added some pictures of coworkers and some of my children's drawings in the background. Of course, my buddy Kramer here joins me every day. So with that, being at home, I also have 3 children who are currently in school upstairs. And so I reserve the right over the course of the next hour or so to have those children interrupt me if they have any questions. I'll do my best to manage both, but it's the reality of the world that we live in today, right? We have unintended consequences that have arisen based on some of the more macro, crazier things that are happening in our world. So I am going to quickly share my screen here, and we will get started. Give me just one second here. I am. All right, perfect. So this is hopefully going to be a fun hour. We are going to spend some time today talking about 3 different things, as Neil mentioned. I've categorized them a little bit differently here for the sake of the visual. We are going to talk about some facts first. It would be remiss of me working for one of the largest social media companies that has a ton of data to not deliver some of that data back to you to understand sort of the lay of the land in terms of where we are now as it relates to the marketplace and COVID-19. I'll talk about what I think matters for you as it relates to your job seeking experience beyond some of the amazing things that you're going to learn from the two women who are following me. They're going to talk a lot about the tactical and some of the, and strategic as well, but some of the real tangible things that you can hold on to. What I'm going to focus on here are some of the things that I think matter beyond that tactical and maybe even strategic stuff, because I think to describe what I'm going to talk about in the what matters section, to describe it as strategic might make it seem disingenuous. And then lastly, I'm gonna share with you my story about how it is that I think we should all be dreaming big, and while that may seem scary, why I think it's super important. So let's start with the facts. And there are a lot of them, and there's a lot of things on here on the slides. These are constantly changing. These are constantly evolving. For the most part, these are the most up-to-date things that I could gather that I could also share publicly with you today. So there are 50 million employers that are currently on LinkedIn right now, and there are more than 14 million open job opportunities on LinkedIn right now. We are, when you look at the vast number of jobs that we have, we are one of the largest, if not in some places, the largest place to find jobs in the world. There are more than 722 million people on LinkedIn. I'm contractually obligated, of course, being a LinkedIn employee, to share with you how big we are. But this number is important for a couple of reasons. One is to illustrate the growth of the network. When I started 10 years ago at LinkedIn, there was 135 million people, and now there's 722. And before we know it, I'm sure we'll be over 1 billion. To me, that number it's an interesting number more than anything else. But what I would want to know if I were you is how many people am I competing against? And so when you look at the Canadian number, it is pretty significant. We see close to 20 million Canadians being on LinkedIn. And what that really means then is that when you look at both the professional and sort of trade worker and frontline worker in Canada, they're on LinkedIn. And so if I'm you and I'm not engaging on LinkedIn and I'm not doing the things that I could do on LinkedIn and all the other things that you can do outside of LinkedIn, what that is telling me then is that you're already a step behind of the competition. Because if we were in a room together right now, I would ask you to look around and look at all the people who are in the same room. And for the most part, those are people who you're competing against for your next opportunity. And it's not a competition where you want to, push the other person down, but it is very much a competition. And so you need to know what your competitors are doing. So this is not a sales pitch for LinkedIn. This is not something that I'm suggesting that you have to do and maybe is the only thing that you should do. But this is for me to draw awareness to you, give you the tools that you need to be able to make the decision as to whether or not this is a place that you want to invest. I think it's completely fine for you to suggest, hey, Perry, after I've heard all your things, this is not for me. That's totally fine. But at least now you can make an educated decision as to whether or not this is something that you want to invest in. And then lastly, there's more than 90 million first line and hourly workers on LinkedIn, and this has significantly increased since COVID. This is our fastest growing demographic at this particular point in time. And so individuals who maybe traditionally didn't look to LinkedIn as a place for them to be, they are now going in numbers that we've never seen before. So let's understand what the pandemic then means on LinkedIn. About 50,000 of the jobs that are on LinkedIn today are now remote based, which is a significant shift. We're seeing this shift across the globe, but certainly here in North America, that more and more employers don't care where you work physically, like where you're physically located. And so that opens up a lot of doors for people, but it also closes some for other individuals who maybe don't have the opportunity to be able to work from home, nor do they feel the most productive while they're at home. So it's an interesting sort of dynamic. I think a lot of the media and a lot of people suggest that working from home is just a blanket sort of positive thing. And someone like myself, who I'm here in Oshawa, my office is in Toronto, but my entire team is in the United States. So I took 65 flights last year, and very rarely was I actually in the Toronto office. I was usually in one of the other offices in the United States. For me, working remotely now full time is actually a blessing in disguise. I get to spend more time with my family and less time on the road. And so I'm totally open to it, but it does remove that connection that Neil was talking about earlier. More than 40 million professionals are searching for jobs today on LinkedIn, so extremely active. And we've seen that significant increase in that remote jobs there that you can see on the screen. So one thing that I want to make sure that you know is that the majority of employers, a strong majority of employers, are using LinkedIn during the hiring process. And so this is really important for us to remember, that if what we want to do as a job seeker is get in the mind of the person who's trying to hire us. And the best way to understand that is to go where they're going, and they're going to LinkedIn. So there's a lot of opportunity and research that you can do to be able to try and get in the mind of that person that you want to start working for. So let's look at some of the data here. Some of this is a little bit dated, but the trends are very much the same. Using the information that we know on LinkedIn, we can see some positive stuff that happens after we see lockdowns or significant outbreaks. We typically see this decline in hiring rate, obviously. We see companies pulling back that budget as it relates to hiring. But then once things start to open back up again, once there is an easing of some of the lockdown measures, we typically see a rebound. In my particular industry, my customer base is worth about 400 million in the United States. We're definitely seeing a bounce back in this particular quarter vis-a-vis the previous quarter. We're certainly not back to the same levels that we were before overall, but there are pockets of industries that are well above what they've ever done before. Some companies are busier than they've ever been before, and just don't have enough people to do what they need to do to meet their demand. So I think ultimately the data is telling us that there is good news in pockets, but certainly good news as it relates to the overall marketplace as we continue to move through what the pandemic is doing to us. We're seeing more and more content being created on LinkedIn. We're seeing more and more news being consumed on LinkedIn. We're seeing more and more people consuming social media feeds than we ever have been before. And this is really much a result of COVID. We're seeing people who are at home, that a lot of that commute time is being replaced by a couple of different things. We're seeing commute time being replaced by, some people are, believe it or not, in better shape than they've ever been before. I know some coworkers of mine that quite literally have dropped the weight of like a 13-year-old person. It's incredible to see what people are doing in terms of self-care. But there's also people who are investing more and more into the news. Certainly the news has been top of mind for a lot of us over the course of the last number of months. But also social media. There is just an increase in the consumption there over time, which is really, really interesting. But what we're also seeing, and I'm glad that Neil brought this up at the beginning, this opportunity for connection. I mean, we're human beings. Human beings want to be connected to one another, and that connection comes into play at all points in time during our day. It can be, really, really strong connections, like with your spouse, or your partner, or a roommate, or a friend, or family. But it can also just be that connection with that barista at Starbucks, or the person at Tim Hortons, or the individual who serves you your lunch, in the afternoon when you go to work, or your professor, or whomever it is that you happen to be engaging with. That connection is something that really, for a lot of us, has gone away. Because I work from home full time and my kids are here, I really don't see and have that physical connection with anyone outside of the 4 people that live with me here. And so there is an increased amount of connection that's happening on LinkedIn. The amount of conversations that people are having on LinkedIn has significantly increased. And I think that really is just a natural sort of a natural output of the fact that we can't have that connection face to face. So we seek out different opportunities to have it. And obviously on LinkedIn, we strive to have that to be a positive place, a place that is professional. We can get into the opinion as to whether or not politics or religion has a part on LinkedIn. I don't want to give away I don't want to influence the jury here, but my particular opinion is that politics and religion absolutely have a place on LinkedIn, as long as it's done in a constructive and respectful manner. Our mission and vision as an organization is to create economic opportunity for the global workforce. you can't create global opportunity unless you have a political will and political policy that allows you to do so. And so I think that healthy debate is very much warranted on LinkedIn. On the religion side of things, listen, if you're a priest or an imam, your profession is religion, and so therefore there should also be a place for you on LinkedIn to be able to talk about that and to be able to engage with others in debate and or dialogue and or sharing things about your particular faith. That makes sense to me. So that might be a little bit controversial, maybe not necessarily what we want to talk about today, but I think it's important to point out that it's not necessarily just one or the other. So let's take a look based on what we know, what we can see on LinkedIn, and in terms of the data and the companies that are trying to hire on LinkedIn. Obviously, we're seeing a significant reduction in the amount of people who are hiring for recreation and travel at this particular point in time, wellness and fitness. Now, we are seeing a little bit of a rebound here. I think companies are starting to adapt and figuring out ways in which they can do things that they couldn't do before. And then obviously retail is having a significant impact, or COVID is having a significant impact on retail. However, the industries that are growing, this is North American wide, healthcare, software and IT services is down slightly, but that's something that is rebounding pretty significantly. Public safety is down, but one of the things that has softened that reduction is the amount of people who are being hired in sort of frontline safety, to public safety type of roles. The amount of security and individuals who are taking temperatures and monitoring ins and outs of different locations has significantly increased. And so while there has been reductions in some areas of that industry, other areas have increased. So there's a lot of really good stuff as it relates to the data that we can provide. I'll leave you with a couple of slides here as it relates to some of the different things that companies are doing on LinkedIn. And so these are companies that you may want to also jump on the bandwagon as it relates to following the type of content and type of engagement that they're having with individuals on LinkedIn. So TED conferences, again, that goes back to this need. We're seeing a significant increase of people who want to learn more. They're taking the opportunity to learn and self-educate themselves. LinkedIn Learning has gone way up, as a number of our competitors have, in terms of the number of hours that have been consumed. Forbes also falls into that, certainly Google, Harvard Business Review. So you can see here that there's a combination of some tech companies, but perhaps more importantly, this idea that, hey, I'm at home, I have a need to better myself, and so I'm going to take advantage of some of the added time I have in my day if I'm either not working or if my commute has suddenly shortened. The largest companies that are on LinkedIn by headcount are listed here. No surprise, obviously, the financial industry takes up a significant proportion of this particular group here. I think if you were to look at the overall numbers outside of LinkedIn, I believe RBC is the largest employer in Canada outside of the federal government. I believe the federal government, and then of course the federal government and the provincial governments combined obviously are the largest employers in this country, but then certainly RBC, thank you Sally, is reaffirming my thought process there. And then the fastest growing companies as it relates to year over year growth with the amount of employees that are on LinkedIn, you can see here. So these would be really great companies for you to, if you want to get into those types of companies that are fast growing, that are smaller perhaps. Maybe you want to be that, a bigger fish in a smaller pond, so to speak. That's something there that you may want to take a look at. So when we look at some of the skills in terms of what both companies are looking for, but also what people are indicating they have on their profile, these are the top skills that we're seeing on LinkedIn, and these are the fastest growing skills. So no surprise here that you're seeing a lot of IT. That certainly is continuing on with a trend that we've seen for a number of years. But interestingly, look at the number 2 and number 3 here. These aren't necessarily in order, but for the sake of the list as it's presented, number 2 and number 3, customer experience and administrative assistance. These are things that we typically didn't see as fastest growing skills, but again, this is indicative of what COVID is doing to the marketplace in terms of letting people or giving people the opportunity to highlight some of the things that they maybe wouldn't have highlighted before, and also to lean into some of the things that we know COVID is shining a bright light on. That customer experience piece in COVID is really, really crucial, in the sense that if customers aren't coming into your store in the same way they were before, how do you still create that customer experience, that customer loyalty, that connection to your company that all retailers hope to establish in a way that you can't do it with that connection that we get when we actually walk into a store and somebody greets us. So ultimately, really, I mean, we talk about social media, and I think some people get a little bit too anxious about not to tell you how you should feel, but I think some anxiety as it relates to being on LinkedIn or any social network from a professional perspective. What should I do or what shouldn't I do? It's always been the same. What you do in real life is really just the same thing as what you would do on LinkedIn. There is, my very first job interview was with a grocery store. And I remember I sat on milk crates in the back with the manager. And the only reason why I got that interview, I was 15 years old, was because my mother knew the manager of that store. So it wasn't because I had an amazing resume or I was able to do whatever I needed to do to, it was very much because my mom knew someone and I happen to know my mom, of course. So really, you can use LinkedIn to be able to understand who your current connections are. Who are the people like my mom when I was 15? Who are those people who can potentially open up doors for you? That's your first degree. And then the second and third degree are those individuals that you can help, they can be influenced by yourself or those first degree. Really, this power of networking is something that hasn't changed. It's just been enhanced by what we have in the digital space. So I'll leave you with this particular stat here before we move on to some of the other stuff that I want to talk about today. This concept that LinkedIn can help you get hired is not just me telling you, is not just me trying to empower you to get the most out of LinkedIn, but it very much is a fact. LinkedIn members are 4 times more likely to get hired when they're referred. And so one of the things that I would suggest to any job seeker when they see a job on LinkedIn that they're really interested in is to not go with what your gut instinct is. The gut instinct, generally speaking, is when you see that job that is something that you really want to do, is to apply for the job. My suggestion is that should be your last resort. And here's why. When we look at this slide previous, we illustrated here the power of your network, the opportunity that those people who are your first degree connections have to open up doors for you. When you see that job, why wouldn't you go to that company and see if there is anyone that you already know that can refer you in? Why not see if there is someone that you know who knows someone that can refer you in? Why not see if there's an opportunity for you to be able to leverage something in your background that is similar to the background of either the recruiter or the hiring manager, or something else that allows you to connect with that company? So if you can do that, then that potentially gets you in front of a recruiter through a referral. And I can tell you, as a former recruiter and as a hiring manager now, I hire people at LinkedIn. I very much would rather have somebody who I work with or somebody who is part of my diversity strategy to be able to have a profile come in front of me to say, I know this person, or I've worked with this person, or this person is part of a community that I am in or I'm allied to that I think would be a good fit. This is significant in terms of the opportunity that you have to be able to get in front of the hiring manager in the way that you would want to. So that leads me into this next topic that I want to talk to you about. And this is really what I think matters. What is it that employers look for beyond the skill set, beyond the hard and soft skills? You hear this term or this phrase being used all the time. We want to hire people who are a cultural fit. We want to find people who can fit into the organization. There's a lot of problems with that particular type of thinking. And I think on both sides, there can certainly be It certainly doesn't help your diversity strategy if you're, as an employer, if you're only thinking about hiring people who are like you. Because then if it's like, if that was the case for me, then I would only be hiring white guys who were heterosexual and went to Western. And that just isn't a good business strategy. I don't need to join another fraternity. But I think on the flip side, if sometimes I think that job seekers, when they hear cultural fit, they think that that means that they have to be the type of person who can put in a full day's work and then go out for a beer with their boss or a beer with their team. And obviously pre-COVID days, we can't really do it. We can have happy hour, virtual happy hours now, but it doesn't mean that either. Cultural fit isn't about that either. It's not about that maybe personal connection or even social connection, perhaps more so, that we think cultural fit is. Cultural fit is about understanding what your values are as an individual, but also understanding what the values and the culture is of that organization. And is there a match there? Do you align with what the company is trying to achieve? Do you align with the values that the company not only purports to have, but actually incorporates and lives every single day? Is it a culture that's congruent with the way in which you like to work, in the way in which you can be successful, in the way in which that you can get the most out of that opportunity, so that that opportunity translates itself into so many more opportunities for you along the road in your career? The job that you have now, or the first or second job that you have next, isn't just a job, it's part of your career journey. A job is something that is self-contained. It's very much something that is, it's almost disposable. I don't want to necessarily suggest that they're easy to get and that we want to throw them away, but I've had significant changes in my career over time. And that's just because I've had so many different types of jobs, but there is a commonality amongst all of them that has gotten me to where I am today in terms of the experiences that I gained from all of those different jobs as they have been combined together. So let's talk about, this is not a sales pitch for LinkedIn at all, but I thought the best way for me to talk about how values and culture can help you in your job search is to talk about ours and talk about the journey that we've been on as a company to be able to really truly understand the type of individual that we want to hire at this company that maybe goes beyond what the job description says. I'll start by saying that our former CEO wrote a blog post on LinkedIn where he drew a Venn diagram of the people he likes to work with most. And this really set the stage for how we live and breathe these cultural values every single day at this company. And he talked about the Venn diagram in three bubbles. The first bubble was he wants to work with someone who gets shit done. The next person was somebody who likes to dream big. And then finally, he likes to work with people who want to have fun. And that was a really critical moment, I think, in our time as an organization, because it not only said something about him as the CEO of an organization, but it certainly spoke volumes to me as a hiring manager way, 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 way down the totem pole to say like, oh yeah, that, like if I can hire someone like that, then that's someone who is going to be able to help me succeed in my career. And ultimately we can go on this journey together and be mutually successful. So that's what I look for, but that's also a little flippant. You can't really put that down on a sheet of paper, even though he did. These are our values as a company. These are the things that every single day we strive to. We celebrate people who achieve these, who live these and breathe these every single day. And how we approach problems, how we approach our customers, how we engage with one another is really, you can see these things shine through each and every single day. So the first one is members first. This concept that without the membership, without everyone, those 722 million members, regardless of whatever corporate enterprise we have, we need to be about members first. I've been in meetings with product where they've come up with an amazing idea for our platform, And we talk about it and then realize that ultimately that's not going to put our free members first. That's not going to put every single one of those 722 people first. That we're not thinking about them first. In that particular moment, in that particular brainstorm, we were maybe thinking about the bottom line. And so we allow ourselves to check the ideas, check our thoughts, check our actions to say, is what I'm really doing members first? Now, imagine if we were to hire somebody from another organization that didn't have this type of philosophy to their work. That would be a real friction. That would be something that probably wouldn't really work. They could be the greatest developer or the greatest salesperson or the best at their craft. But if they didn't think and didn't embody this members first concept, they're just not going to be a fit. We wouldn't hire them, or they wouldn't stick around for very long. Relationships matter. We are very much a relationships driven company. And that connection with individuals, however we can make it, is super, super important. Be open, honest, and constructive. This is one of the only ones that has actually changed over time. This used to be open, honest, and direct. But that really just opened up the door for people to just, give feedback and not really offer a solution. This idea of being open, honest, and constructive is very much, tell me how it is. But at the same time, I also want to make sure that we have a healthy dialogue about how we could potentially fix the problem. We want to inspire excellence. We have changed this one before too. It used to be demand excellence, but that seemed a little bit too heavy-handed. We want to, through our actions, through what we do every single day, we want to be able to inspire excellence of the people who are around us, both our employees, but also our customers and just our membership in general. We want to take intelligent risks. I could do an entire seminar on intelligent risks alone. It's really a mathematical equation where you can identify something that you may want to do and you quantify how, what type of outcome could potentially come from this if you were successful over the risk of not being successful. And if it meets a certain criteria, then jump forward, go full on in, knowing full well that it may fail, but having that permission to fail. But then also understanding that, listen, if I'm successful, I'm going to take this company to the next level. That's not something that people always have ingrained in them or something that people are comfortable with. And so if you're not comfortable working in an organization that takes intelligent risks often and therefore has a culture of change, that can be really disruptive. It would be so valuable for you to be able to know that and demonstrate that in an interview, if that is something you're positive about, to say, listen, I am all for taking intelligent risks and here's why, here's my experience with it. That would just be so amazing for you to be able to do. That's not going to be on the job description, but that's something that you can find out if you do research on the company. And then we want people to act like owners. We want to create this one LinkedIn type of culture where we're all together in it. We're in it together, that, truly the only way that we're going to be successful and continue to move forward our mission and vision as an organization is if we're acting like an owner. These are things that, listen, I didn't train up on how to talk about these things. I didn't have to go through, I didn't have to do a lot of research. This is just, for me, after 10 years at the company, this is instinct. This is something that just matters to me so much. Culture is really important as well. Culture really is the fabric by which your employees are connected, and getting to understand the culture of an organization can really help you as it relates to being able to maximize your chances of being hired there. And we have 5 cultural tenets, and there's a 6th one that I'm going to spend a little bit more time on because I think it's just really important, especially where we are at this point in time in our world. But the 5 official parts of our culture are that of transformation. Transformation back in the day used to really talk about how can we move you from the role that you're in now to the next level up? How can you be promoted? Like, we celebrated promotions because they were happening fast and furious. We were a growing company. There was 1,500 employees when I started at LinkedIn, and now there's more than 15,000. So the growth over almost 10 years has been astronomical from my perspective. But transformation doesn't just mean a promotion. What it really means is transformation of self. And that can mean, you learned a new skill, you're able to navigate a scenario that you weren't able to navigate before. However it is that you define transformation of self, that's something that we want you to concentrate on. We also want you to concentrate on transformation of company. How is it that you can come into our company and make our company better? How can you make our company better and then therefore make all of us better? And then lastly, how can you transform the world? We by creating economic opportunity for the global workforce are striving to do that, to make every individual around the world more productive and more successful. That requires transformation. And so how is it collectively can we work together to make sure that we're transforming not only ourselves, the company, but also the world? Integrity is super important for our organization. It's basically described as doing the right thing even when no one is watching. And that may seem elementary, but as the father of 3 young children, that's not something that's always instinctual. I can tell you, there's a lot of proof of that. But it's something that we learn, and I think some people have a better job of picking this up quicker than others. But ultimately, this is a hard stop. If you're not acting with integrity, this is not a place for you. Collaboration. How is it that we can work together to make sure that we're, getting the best out of one another, but also creating the best possible product for one another? Humor is something that's also evolved a little bit. Humor was described before as just people who are funny. Like, can we make the office fun? That obviously, sets aside a whole segment of our population who are just not comfortable with that and not something that they want to lean into. And so humor really describes how is it that can you bring a lightness to the work? How can you make sure that you are self-aware enough to know that while our work is important, we're not curing cancer, we're not sending someone to the moon. If we make a mistake today, it's not going to end things. If we have the opportunity to have some humility to understand that, listen, what I'm doing here is important, but not the end of the world. If something happens awry, then so be it. And so we want to make sure that we embody that in everything that we do. Now we were a publicly traded company before we were purchased by Microsoft. And so now we're part of an even larger publicly traded company. So obviously results matter. All of these things really, when we're doing them correct, equate to us achieving results in ways in which we never could have imagined. And so I think the results piece is sometimes something that people focus on, especially if you're in sales, because ultimately I need to be the best possible salesperson. The more I sell, the less likely or the more likely we're going to be successful, but also the less likely that I'll have any problems or have to deal with anything as it relates to my manager. But in reality, we need to make sure that we're doing that, incorporating all of these cultural tenets. And so it's really important for us to make sure that, yes, results are important. Without results, we don't have an organization, we don't have employment, but we can't do it at risking losing any of these other values or cultural tenets that I've described here before. The last one here that is super important for us, especially over the course of the last couple of years, is diversity, inclusion, and belonging. We call this DIBS. I think it was probably 2014, 13 maybe. I went to a global meeting of our sales organization, and there was probably 1,000 of us in Vegas at that point in time. We were in a big room, and our leader of sales got up, our vice president of sales got up on the stage and called up his immediate team. And we realized that as soon as that happened, that visual of 7 white men up on the stage who were the leaders of this organization, there was something that was just fundamentally wrong with that. And thankfully, Mike agreed. It was pointed out to him, and he fully agreed that that is just not the best way to run a business. Ultimately, we want to make sure that we have the most talented people, but also people from different backgrounds and different perspectives and different ways in which they were raised from different areas of the country, of the world, because their perspective offers a unique perspective that I don't have, having grown up in the suburbs and coming from a significant amount of privilege. And so we've invested heavily in diversity, inclusion, belonging over the last number of years, where we are in the United States, we're focused on hiring more Black and Latinx talent. as well as ensuring that we have as close to a gender split as we possibly can from a male-female perspective. And we've achieved that now, or close to achieving that in management. Certainly at the individual contributor level, we're there. Lots of work to be done in the Black and Latinx community, but we're committed to it. Here in Canada, the focus is on Indigenous peoples, and how can we make sure that we are not only elevating them on the platform in a way that allows them to have a voice, but how can we also create hiring strategies for not only our customers, but for us as a company to make sure that we're identifying talent in that particular community that we may not have before. This is really, really important. And it's not the responsibility of someone who is Black or First Nations or Latinx to do this. It's the responsibility of me and other individuals who are at this company. This concept of allyship is really, really important at our company. It's a proactive, ongoing, and incredibly difficult practice of unlearning and relearning. There's a lot of things that we learn that we just don't even realize that can skew the way in which we look at the world. And being an ally isn't just reading a book. It's not just liking a comment on social media because, you know, we support what's happening in the world. It's when you see a man getting murdered on the street by police, saying and doing something, and doing that at work, doing that in your personal life. Being an ally doesn't mean that I don't talk about issues of race or contribute to making the world a better place outside of work. It means that I talk about it at work. And LinkedIn fosters that type of community where it's my responsibility as an ally to not only to be an ally, but to be a co-conspirator, to raise my voice when someone who is in who is not in the room that is of a minority group that maybe should be or could have been. And so this is really important for us. It's really important for me to create a better place for the individuals who work for me. I want them to feel like they belong. That's incredibly difficult to do. But the only way that I can do that is to demonstrate in real time and in real life, communicate both the areas in which I'm leaning into because I think that there's a gap, but to also have honest conversations of where I don't know what it is that I don't know, and to also admit to any mistakes that I may make along the way. So all of these things are super important for you to understand if you were to ever apply for a company that invested in these kind of things so much. This is what really matters. This is the type of stuff that is going to get you the job on top of the amazing skills, soft and hard, that you already have. The opportunity you have to be able to lean into some of these things that a company has as it relates to their cultures and values is extremely vital for you to be successful as an individual. If this is something that makes you uncomfortable, that is okay. But it also means that it may not necessarily be a place that you want to be. And that's okay too. I think if we put all of the cards on the table and you understand what it is that you're getting into, and we understand what you're comfortable with and what you're not comfortable with, we can all make a better decision independently and together of what the next play is going to be in your career. So the culture and values, and then of course, DIBS, diversity, inclusion, and belonging is really what makes up a significant proportion of what it is I look for in someone that I am making the decision on whether or not we should make a hire. So I'm going to close with dreaming big and why I think that's important, and then I'll get into some of your Q&A. I also have the chat box open, so if you don't know where the Q&A box is or you can't find it, feel free to use the chat box. That's fine too. So just quickly, I alluded to this at the beginning about how my career journey has been a little bit tumultuous, and just want to share a quick story with you and some. I will leave you with something tactical at the end of this. If I think back to 11, 12 years ago, oh my goodness, that seems like just such a long time ago. I was such a different person, but I was in recruitment And it was a sales job. It was 100% commission. So if I didn't place anyone, I didn't make any money. It was high stress, but man, it was a lot of fun. And I did pretty well financially too. I did that for 6 years. I was able to work in that environment and make enough money to get married and go on a nice honeymoon and buy a house and all that kind of stuff. It was really good. And it was going good. It was fantastic. And then unfortunately, life decided to rear its ugly head, as it does sometimes. And I got incredibly sick, and I was required to have surgery and treatment. And I was off of work for a good 6 months, and then decided to go back to work part time. And realized in that process of going back to work that my values, my values, and the culture that I was longing for had changed. And so I made the decision to go to my boss. Thankfully, I had a good relationship with him. And I said, hey, this is not something that I really want to do anymore, but I like the company. Do you think that there is anything that could be a fit for me? And so we noodled on it. We discussed it a little bit. And he reminded me of two things that any good recruiter should do with their candidates. And so this is what I would ask you to look out for any of the recruiters that you work with. One is, he said to me, Perry, what do you want to be when you grow up? And it's a question, frankly, that is something that I could ask my 6-year-old son upstairs now, or my 8-year-old, or my 11-year-old. I could ask my 81-year-old mother the same question, and anyone else in between, and we'd probably have an answer. My 6-year-old probably changes every day, and my mother's would probably be less conventional. But it's a question that applies to us no matter where we are in our career. But it's such a super important question, but also one that trips us up. Because typically we say we don't know, or we say, that's a good question. I haven't thought about that. I challenge you to think about that. I challenge you to understand what it is that is important to you in your next play. What are the values and the culture that you want to be a part of? And what are the things that you want to do? Do you want to go to the moon? Okay. Maybe you can actually go to the moon, but not the way in which you're thinking. Maybe if you took inventory and stock of who you are and what you are today, you find yourself part of NASA or part of a team that is helping someone go to the moon in the future. Society too often puts in front of us obstacles that are just there because they were there for them. We can or can't do something because of where we grew up or who we lived with or what we did and what we didn't. And yes, there is privilege and there are things in society that are real obstacles, but there shouldn't be any obstacles up here. And so if you dream big, if you blue sky, if you think about what it is that you want to be when you grow up, write it down. Write down that job description. That's what the other thing that a good recruiter should tell you is write down what that job description looks like. And then take that and understand what you're good at already in that job description. Understand what are the gaps that you need to fill and go fill them. That's what I did. I took that job description and I presented it back to my company, and it didn't work out. They said that they loved the new vision I had for this particular role that I invented, but it wasn't a good fit for them. But they liked me, and so they wanted me to stay, and so they gave me another type of job. But I realized that in the 3 or 4 months doing that job, I actually hated that job more than I hated the job before. And so now I couldn't go back to the company and say, can you get me another new job? And so I started to look externally, and I decided, hey, maybe I could go back into recruitment. And that wasn't a good idea. I mean, I was coming home and my wife was telling me that I was toxic. It was just not a good fit at all. And so I decided to do another thing that my recruiters told me to do, and something that we talked about earlier, which is to look at that second and third degree network of myself and understand if there's anyone there that could open up some doors. And the first person I called, funny enough, was a gentleman by the name of Jonathan Baldock. And I said, hey, Jonathan, I'm really confused here. I don't know what it is. Like my job is just not going well. I need something new. And him being a former recruiter as well said to me, well, Perry, what is it that you want to be when you grow up? This time I had an answer. I quite literally pulled out a sheet of paper that I had written down my ideal job description. I wrote down the objective. I wrote down the nice haves or the must haves, and then the nice to haves. I wrote it out like a job description. I read it to him. And he said to me, holy. at LinkedIn. And 3 months later, I was in San Francisco having dinner with my future boss, being wined and dined, and I felt like a king. And I landed my dream job. I was able to put the pieces together to understand what I could do, what I couldn't do, what I liked to do, what my values were, what was important to me, what was the type of culture that I wanted to be a part of. And ultimately, I really just answered the question of what I wanted to be when I grew up in that moment. And that was, I started July 4th, 2011 at LinkedIn. And I can tell you that over the course of almost these 10 years with this company, this has been by far the best job I've ever had. This is by far, and I mean this with no hesitation, I don't mean this with any hyperbole at all. The people I work with are my family. And I believe that I've been able to do that because of the opportunity I gave myself to go through the process of understanding what it is I wanted to be when I grow up. And so I would just challenge you to dream big, to think about the things that you want to do. Think about the things that you want to be when you grow up, so that you have the same opportunity that I was able to do, to create your opportunity, create the space for you to be what you want to be when you grow up. And it'll just be really, really rewarding. So I hope this was helpful. I hope that I was able to combine a little bit of the fact and what matters, but also why it's important to dream big, why it's really important to understand who you are so that you can project that and get the same level of respect and the same level of contribution back from a prospective employer. I really hope that was helpful. I've got a couple of minutes and I can see that there are some questions. So I'm going to answer those, but I will say thank you so much for the opportunity. I wish we could have done this in person, but I can tell you, sitting here in my basement and now having spoken for almost an hour, the amount of energy I have is really, it's off the charts. I'm going to have to go walk around the block, and I hope that part of that has been translated to you. Zoom can be hard. It's a wonderful gift, but it can be hard. So I just hope that there is something here that has been helpful that you're able to take off. What are those means? A great question, Mona. I think that a lot of it has to do with how you express yourself, how you're answering questions. But I also think it's important for you to express proactively to the recruiter and to the hiring manager things about the culture and the values that are important to you, that you resonate with. In your research of any organization that you go work for, or go interview with, will have this on their website. This isn't secret. You could go Google right now, LinkedIn culture and values, and you'll come up with a page with all of these things on it. And so there's an opportunity for you to talk about that in the interview, and to just make sure that, like, hey, I wake up every morning knowing that what I do, no matter how bad of a day I may think it's going to be, I'm going to help people create economic opportunity. That gets me out of bed. That's pretty awesome. And so I can illustrate that in an interview. What's a good way to build first and second degree relationships on LinkedIn if the student doesn't have parents in Canada? Great question there, because I use the example of my mother. I think a lot of it has to do with, with today. Like, if you haven't already, I would write down the names of the people who are speaking today, who are facilitating today, and reach out to them in a professional way. Don't just ask them for a connection. Send them a message and thank them for the investment of time. And if there's a question that you think that they could answer, or some way in which they could, in some way in which you could potentially help them, then by all means, go ahead and do that. So I think that you have to be brave a little bit, I think, because I think the idea of reaching out to people isn't always easy for everyone, but you can also leverage the people who are around you, right? Like, leverage your friends, leverage your connections, leverage your professors. So as you grow through your career, your network is just organically going to grow. Are there any measures to include immigrant population along with Indigenous community as Canada is seeing surge? Yes, of course. So from a DIBS perspective, our focus in Canada is on Indigenous populations. In Canada, LinkedIn focuses on educating and working with communities of a number of different, in a number of different buckets. One would be job seekers. Two would be immigrants, specifically refugees in Canada, but certainly immigrants. And then students and new graduates. Those are some of the areas in which we like to focus on, because we feel as though those are the areas in which we can have the greatest amount of impact. I don't share my slides, unfortunately. A lot of what we talked about is available online. And the facts at the beginning are just ones that change pretty quickly. So I don't like to have those out in the wild without knowing where they're going to be. There is a Tima, I've converted you. I'm not sure that was my intention, but hey, I'll take it. Thank you, Tima. There's a couple of other questions here that are big ones. Sally, let's take that one offline. Those are good ones there. I just want to make sure that I answer some of the other tactical questions. I'm going to leave it there because some of these ones are meaty and I want to make sure that I end on time. So here's my last thing that I'll say. You know how to find me. I'm on LinkedIn. So if there are any follow-up questions or discussion points or anything else that you'd like to talk about, please don't hesitate to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Just mention that you saw this talk here today so I understand the context. And I'd be happy to work through some of those additional questions. Thank you so much. I hope you got something out of this. It's really tough as a presenter, because I can't see you. I can't see your reaction like I would if I was in real life. So please, 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 for the future speakers, be as kind and as generous to them as you have been to me here today. Really appreciate it. It makes our job a little bit easier and allows us to be able to engage with you a little bit more. So thank you. Enjoy the rest of the morning. Really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Perry. And I don't think I can say it any better than Sally, who said this was really informative and really inspiring. So Sally, if you don't mind me borrowing your words to thank Perry, I fully agree with you. And Perry did exactly that. So you see me just sort of like walking around right now because we are in a 5-minute scheduled break, but you may have to stretch your legs a little bit, or coffee or orange juice or whatever your beverage of choice might be before we go into our Getting Hired in a Virtual Recruitment World session, which will start at 10:15. But we do, because this is kind of like a working, engaging break, and Perry was just so fantastic that Perry, are you still there? That if we could, like, during our break, ask you one other additional question?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Perfect. Well, one, love that you're from Oshawa. I grew up in Oshawa.
Oh,
great,
nice.
great place. Two, love like your injection of personality and humor, and that you're contractually obligated to demonstrate.
Yeah, that's not true. That's not.
But it goes to that, like, that humor and being personable, right? Like, and people are really looking for their authentic selves coming into the job market, and really also appreciated the call to allyship, particularly with respect to obligations with white to work through and against white supremacy, and the pieces of hope that you brought, like, and data informed, that with the curve that the market will rebound, like, that was fantastic, and the permission to fail, that was fantastic around hope. And also highlighting the skills that are needed, because regardless of people's discipline academically, those aspects of analysis are across, they're an essential skill across disciplines. And also the customer relations experience pieces, those interpersonal aspects are across disciplines, right? And so wanted to pick up on one of the questions, particularly for our students, because we have a lot of students who are international students, or are from families of immigrants, and a considerable who come from racialized populations and may not have that same social capital, or come from more collectivist cultures. And I think back to this prof at the Rothman Business School, who called networking, particularly for folks who are from racialized backgrounds or more collectivist cultures, calls networking and competition kind of this dirty field, because it's not necessarily within who we are, and we're being asked to play a different game. And like you mentioned, because it is competitive, right? But relationships do matter, and that stat with respect to someone being referred being 4 times more likely to get the job. And so with that context, from like an inequities and marginalization perspective, how does one sort of operate in that competitive, relationally important context when you may be from a background that is a bit more collectivist, where networking and competition really just aren't part of your identity fabric? Like, how do you do that authentically?
It's a really good question. Thank you for that. I will say that it's not lost on me that you're asking the white guy to educate the potentially people who are not white how to be more white, maybe, is how some people might interpret that question. I know that's not what you're necessarily asking, but it is an interesting one. I mean, like, how do you, at what point do you start being inauthentic or disingenuine to play the game, as you said, and I think that's an accurate representation, while at the same time also being true to yourself? It's a tough one. I think it is easier for me, someone like myself who grew up in Canada, and just by virtue of, as soon as I entered the workforce, I immediately had this network of people that I could call upon, because I've been here my entire life, and while my parents are immigrants themselves, I was born here. So I think that you have to look around and take stock of who's already in your network. And the one thing that may be different is the size that you start off with. But ultimately, everyone that you have around you, whether you be because of school or because of part-time work, and family, of course, is super important. That's how I got my first job interview, but I could just have very well been 25 as I was 15 at that point in time. So I think you have to understand the rules of the game is one. And the way in which you understand the rules of the game is to ask questions. And then 2 is to understand what parts of the game you're willing to play. And play is in quotations there. And ultimately, the reason why I say understand the parts of the game that you're willing to play, if you play the parts of the game that feel disingenuous and inauthentic to you, then you're going to come across that way too. So you got to figure out what are the parts that you're comfortable with and ease your way into it. I understand that they may not be easy for some people because you need the job now, you need a paycheck now. But ultimately, there are some real tactical things that you can do that you'll learn about this morning that I think go beyond just any of the things that might make people feel anxious. The last thing I will say is I actually don't like networking myself. I really do not like it. Put me in a room with cocktails and appetizers, and I got to walk around and talk to people. That is not my happy place. But at the same time, I can do that a lot easier on LinkedIn because I don't have to talk to people. I don't have to actually make that physical connection with people. So I actually find networking on LinkedIn a lot easier because it removes a lot of the social conventions that we have, because we don't have that in-person type of meeting. I crave relationships. I need to meet with people, but the cold calling or the casual conversation is not something that I'm super tied into. So it's not easy, but I think that you just have to, understand what you want to try to achieve and then do the best that you can.
Yeah, no, and thank you so much, Perry, for that very honest and very accurate piece. And I think the authenticity of focusing on relationships, right? Because networking might make it seem a little bit more transactional and a bit more of a force piece, but really it's about relationships. And just going back to our land acknowledgement and Joseph Mokwabi's teachings for us, that idea of connecting for the betterment of others, as in terms of building community and uplifting others in the communities, is definitely important. And how I see it is being engaged within a community, right?
Right on. Yep.
Which I think is so perfect. So thank you so much.
Pleasure.
And now we transition to yet another excellent guest. We're so lucky today to have like this phenomenal lineup. So Mary Burrell, thank you so much for your time today. And so for folks who don't know a little bit about Mary Burrell, I have the honor of saying that Mary Burrell is president of Talent Egg, which is an online business, she is an online business executive and lawyer with a background in media, technology, and IP law, intellectual property law. A former CBC journalist and TV producer, in 2016, Mary took the reins as president of talentegg.ca. Have a look at that website. Mary's also going to show you through it in case you have not visited talentegg.ca, which is Canada's #1 award-winning job board and online career resource that connects top employers with top students and grads with highly targeted, engaging employer branding and recruitment services. So important in our climate right now, if folks are not sensing a theme with how this program has been put together. At Talent Egg, Mary merges her background in media production and marketing with her business and legal experience in online businesses to grow Talent Egg nationwide and help more employers connect with students from coast to coast to coast to border, just in case you're thinking of Canada. Clients of Talent Egg include award-winning global enterprises and exceptional Canadian employers committed to recruiting the best students and graduates and developing the leaders of tomorrow. Mary is a certified employer branding professional recognized by Universal Global and the International Employer Branding Academy. So again, you can see how we're just so fortunate to build off of Perry's piece and have Mary's expertise with respect to presenting ourselves in an online market. And with almost all recruitment going virtual, job seekers need to understand and master these digital tools that will be critical for getting noticed by employers and landing that dream job, or to Perry's comment, those jobs that build experiences towards realizing your values, interests, strengths, and abilities. And with that, less of me and more of Mary. Mary, it's all you.
Well, thank you very much, Neil. That was such a lovely introduction. And I'm very, very pleased to be here this morning. And I hope that you can all hear me and that you're all here to, I guess, go through this journey that we're experiencing. We are in a real threshold. You're in a historical moment right now. So when I talk about some of the things that Talent Egg does to support students and recent graduates sort of launch their careers and prepare for that school to work transition, we have to understand that we're doing it truly in a historic period. You know, we've been talking about networking. Perry talked about how he didn't like networking. And I have to say, it's a tough sort of thing to become involved in. But now we're having to reach out and connect and make relationships in a digital world. And although this will be somewhat temporary due to COVID, you know, until we get this pandemic under control, we're obviously doing a lot of what we're doing in terms of job seeking and connecting with employers virtually. The virtual world is going to continue to be part of the way businesses operate and the way employers recruit for their hires. So it's really important. It's a critical time to be able to use this constructively and to be able to really sort of engage with those learning experiences that allow you to get that foundational kind of experience and comfort in addressing all these sorts of challenges of your job seeking career path in a virtual world that will someday become a much more in-person experience. But for now, it's a great opportunity to really hone those skills. So I'm going to just take on the control of this webinar in terms of being able to take you through my presentation. So just a little bit about Talent Egg. Talent Egg now is 12 years old. Sorry about that little pause, as we were trying to get sort of the digital connection so that I could control this. Talent Egg is 12 years old. It was launched by a young woman who had challenged in terms of building her own career. So she had gone to the UK and had been inspired by her job search there and finding a platform that really was very helpful to her. So she came back to Canada and actually built that herself. We acquired it as part of our sort of ecosystem of online job boards and career resource. We also own a company called Charity Village that focuses on jobs and careers within the nonprofit sector. Talent Egg, though, was always focused and remains focused on building that relationship between employers who are trying to hire young people. So early career graduates and students who are looking for their first internships, their first co-op positions. So that's where we're really dedicated, and we continue to be that way. It's a very niche but very important role that we see that we play in the whole ecosystem of the workforce. Again, we focus on 18 to 30-year-olds, and really our focus is to help career-oriented, ambitious students and recent graduates to be able to launch their careers with some of the top employers in Canada. And each year, we really focus on ensuring that we understand, we try to keep our fingers to the pulse of what's going on in young people's lives and what they're looking for in their careers and in the kind of employers that they're attracted to. So we reach out to students and grads every year and do quite a robust survey with them. And we take that data and that information and present it to employers to better prepare them in finding ways to attract the kind of candidates that they're looking for to join their organizations. And, you know, normally we had to actually scrap our survey, which had been going on for a couple of months in 2019 and into 2020 for our report this year in 2020, because of course, COVID hit. And so we thought, oh my goodness, well, what mattered yesterday is not necessarily what matters to young people today. So we felt it was really important that employers understood the kind of challenges that young people are facing right now in their careers and as they transition from school to work, and just how they were impacted by the pandemic. And so we ran a second survey that started basically shortly after the shutdown, obviously after March, became a significant thing. And we knew that it was going to be a summer-long experience to find out how many young people were actually impacted. And it was really tough. So we found out that 77% of the students that were surveyed and responded to our survey had lost their job opportunity as a direct result of COVID-19. And what we noticed was we asked them specifically the kind of roles that they lost. So summer jobs, of course, it was a really tough summer this year, for not just for businesses, because we read about those all the time, but also the young people that businesses employ. And so those summer jobs kind of went up in smoke, really. And those are critical kinds of roles where young people get experience. There was a significant number of people who lost full-time jobs, so they had just graduated and were starting their careers. Others, of course, were those internships and co-op placements. So those are ones that typically students who are still in school are using those to build relationships and connect with employers and build those skills. Again, even the new grads and early career professionals, so those are people that have graduated and have somewhere between 1 and 5 years experience, were also impacted by job loss during the COVID-19 pandemic that shut us down during the summer months. But before, I also want to stress really that while it was a really difficult time, a lot of them actually were able to continue to work. So many of the folks who kept their jobs or found jobs were transitioned or onboarded for the first time into work from home kinds of roles. And I think, as I emphasized at the beginning, with COVID-19 continuing, certainly over the winter, with great hopes for a vaccine and new ways that the economy is finding to open up and allow for businesses to continue to function, even in this sort of semi-shutdown experience that we're all going through. Finding a job and working a job in many cases is now a virtual experience. So as I mentioned, from our perspective, the time that you use now to continue to do your job search, to learn skills online, to be able to learn how to network through LinkedIn or other means, using virtual platforms is going to serve you extremely well going forward, because our work life is going to change forever. And even when the pandemic is over, a lot of these tools are going to continue to be used within organizations, and the tools that you use to be able to get hired now will be continued to use, and we know that from speaking to the employers that we work with, are going to continue to be part of the entire sort of process of transitioning from school to work. So I would recommend that you consider that the bright side is that companies are still hiring. They have had a really tough summer. They were trying to scramble and figure out how to continue to function. But don't worry, there are jobs out there. Why do we know? Because we represent companies that are looking for people just like you. And the key for your success is going to be to adapt to these sorts of virtual hiring tools and career resources. And so we want you to know that we're here, and we've got you covered, and we're doing everything we can to bring you more sorts of tools and resources to be able to continue your job search and your career development, developing those skills that will make you attractive to employers. We're bringing those to you in a virtual capacity. And guess what? We've always been virtual. We are a digital company. So this is sort of building on what we do anyway. So we want you to know that we're here, and that that there are opportunities, and to keep your heart and use this time constructively to build out your network of contacts, and to develop your skills, and you'll come out resilient and successful. So I'm going to take you through a couple of steps, and what we try to do to help people like you who might be looking for their first job, or maybe are creating a new career, about some of the tips and tricks that we've got for you, but also some of the tools that we have. So when we think of tackling the job search in this new world that we find ourselves in, we've got a ton of free resources on our website. The Incubator is our online blog, and we have literally thousands of articles that are provided to you for free. They often give you insight into different kinds of employers. They look at and may describe the culture in which they're going, that an employer sort of embraces, so you can do your research. There's job seeking tips. We have many different sorts of materials on how to prepare for an interview and do a good job. We even have a lot of content on doing it virtually as well. We also give you an opportunity to develop those skills to write a good CV, how to write a great cover letter, what to look out for in applicant tracking systems that employers use that could impact your application. So all of these things you can find reams of information on our Incubator, which is provided to you for free and is focused on the kinds of challenges that you face as a young person. You can join our website, and when you do that and register with us, we'll send you updates and save jobs that you're interested in so you can come back and apply for them once you've customized your CV and your cover letter. And we also publish a lot of information about events, now virtual events, that you can attend to be able to meet up with employers. So when you actually register, we'll ask you to fill out a profile, and that could include things like what's your major, your graduation year, your school, your location, what your career interest is in. And when those kinds of opportunities come in with our clients, we'll send you out a specific email blast that will let you know. We target it so that we're not going to be sending you things about nursing jobs if you're studying engineering or technology, or vice versa. So we want to make sure that we're giving you relevant opportunities based on what your interests are and what your background is. So that's a really great opportunity for you to stay on top of job opportunities and to be able to respond quickly to them. We also just launched something that I think you'll find very useful and exciting during this sort of virtual world that we're living in. It's called the Candidate Video Showcase. And it's the first national online career website that allows young candidates to upload their CV and record a video elevator pitch. So we talked a little bit earlier when Perry was talking about networking with Neil about, what is networking and how do you develop those skills? Well, often you may have heard from your career education professionals within your school about an elevator pitch. And all that means is, what's a short introduction that you can give to somebody you just met that lets them understand who you are, what you're passionate about, what you're interested in, and why you'd be, basically a great addition to any team. And so we offer you an opportunity to actually record a video introducing yourselves that is really about who you are and what you're passionate about, and it's completely under your control. So you can say whatever you'd like that you think is, that makes you uniquely you and attractive to an employer. And what happens on the other side is employers know that they're dependent on things like applicant tracking systems and those kinds of tools, but they also know that by using them, they're missing candidates that could be really fabulous. So they're very interested in being able to meet people that might have fallen through the cracks in terms of their recruitment systems. And this is a great way to be noticed by employers, even when you haven't actually applied for a job that they have. And so we really encourage you to think about doing that. And that is what a candidate video showcase profile looks like. So there's a little section there that describes in text form about who that individual is, and what they care about, who they are fundamentally. What's important to them, and also those kinds of other important information. So what school they go to, the program they're studying, what industries they're interested in, and what locations that they're in. And we also, if you are bilingual, you can also indicate that as well. So that's really important information for recruiters to know. And so it's all right there, and it also allows the individual to be able to tell their story. And they can actually reach out to you via the platform to ask you for an interview using the platform to do a video interview with you. Or they might provide screening questions to you that you can record on your own time the answers to. So it's a really nimble, very robust platform that allows you to present your best self to employers. And we've got a little bit of a video, and I'm hoping you're going to be able to see it. Fingers crossed that the technology works, but it's basically going to tell you what's the value of doing a video introduction.
Hi there, my name is Tiffany. My name is Kira.
My name is Justin.
My name is Devika Patel.
And I'm a BCom student at McGill University.
The Talent Aid Candidate Video Showcase is useful for employers and recruiters in a variety of ways. First, it gives you the opportunity to meet talent from across the country in one central location. It's easy and seamless to use as you review and screen resumes and get a sense of the knowledge, skills, and attitudes each candidate is bringing to the table.
It allows you to kind of convey how unique and genuinely you that you are and how well-rounded you are in terms of communication. I think that really to succeed in most roles today, you need to be really great at both oral and written communication. And it's sad that most normal job application ways, you're not really able to show that oral communication until the interview. And often by that time, many fantastic applicants' resumes have perhaps been sifted through. So I'm very happy to be on this platform and be able to show employers who I truly am.
So I hope you were able to see that video clearly enough to get a glimpse of how it works and why it's important to you and your job search. We encourage you to check it out. There's lots of tutorials on where you actually record your video introduction. So there's plenty to learn, but there's a lot of resources to support you in doing a great job. And you can do it as many times as you want until you're happy with the results. And that way we're able to, let you be seen and your best self displayed to potential employers all the time, at any time, at your own convenience by being able to record this and upload your CV. So we certainly hope that you'll check it out, because we're really excited about bringing it to job seekers, especially now when we're in such challenging times and we need to have robust sort of virtual platforms to support. So speaking about CVs, want to talk a little bit about building a strong one. CVs are interesting. We have a lot of content that we provide on our website that tells gives you some advice. A lot of it is actually coming from employers. So we'll actually interview employers about what they care about when they look at CVs. What stands out to them is a real quality CV when they're going through applications. And so I'd encourage you to check out the incubator that has lots of written content. We've learned a lot of employers look to increasingly are looking for more well-rounded individuals. The pace of technology and the way that the workplace is changing so quickly, and we've all experienced this during the pandemic, means that they're looking for resilient, adaptive individuals and people who bring more of themselves to work than just their technical skills. For a lot of us, gaining experience can be really tough. Back in the day for my first job, I did a free internship, but it was very valuable for me to get the kinds of materials and experience that I then put on my CV. Today, we don't encourage people to work in free internships, but there's other ways that you can get experience. So we recommend to do volunteer work, and there's lots of opportunities, especially now, to do that. And why do we do that? Well, because you can connect to causes that are meaningful to you. It's a way of fattening up sort of a skinny resume. You're building relationships in community and a network of other professionals that will stand you in good stead in terms of being a good reference to you when you apply for jobs. And it really helps you in working on those interviewing skills, because interviewing skills are something that are learned. Nobody just walks into their first interview and does a fabulous job, or it's pretty rare when they do. You get better by doing. And so we encourage a lot of young people to volunteer for something that they care about. It's constructive and meaningful, and they've got something to talk about when they get into those interviews, because employers are looking for people who are engaged with their community and really have a much broader sense of themselves and their relationship with the world. So we do have a lot of free volunteer listings that are available on our website. One of the largest that are specially curated for young people. And apologies, but there we go. The other way of doing this is also to do virtual skills building kinds of case studies and competitions. We've been really active this summer in transitioning some of the things that you used to do in person by competing and case study competitions, et cetera. And now we're doing them virtually. We host them on our website. So we promote a lot of that to help young people build those skills, but also you'll notice among those people that you see on the screen are a bunch of employers. So they're often the ones that are judging the competitors on the quality of their pitch or their case study submission. So we encourage you to do a lot of that. It's great to put on a resume. And so you can check us out. We send out notices about when this is happening and we sponsor them for employers. It's really critical to be able to do your research as well. So, you have to sort of understand who it is that you're applying to, and understand and modify your application and your CV to that role that you're applying for, but also understand the company that you're applying to. So if you customize that, it shows attention to detail and you're caring about being able to show that you've put in the work that you care about the role that you're applying for and why you're a great fit for it. So make sure that you explain that in your cover letter and make sure that you understand the role and the company itself, and make sure that that knowledge that you've gained from doing your research is demonstrated by your application. And you can also, we've got lots of content about various employers, so to help you do that. So previous to COVID, we used to do these things called Talent Egg Talks, and we'd spend 30 minutes with an employer and take live questions on Instagram and Facebook, and then respond simultaneously, all live, to the questions that were sent in by people like you, job seekers. And now, post-COVID, those are a lot harder to do, but in some respects, because we can't do them in person, but we can do them virtually, and we've been doing a lot of them. So if you register as a user, we can send you notifications of when we have new ones coming up. We just finished doing one with IBM where Susan Bednowski, who is a campus recruiter, did a resume roast, as she called it, which is looking at 3 different kinds of resumes and really sort of breaking them down to show what works and what doesn't work, different options, really valuable information straight from the lips of a recruiter. We also did lots of work with Career Connections, which represents the insurance industry. We've done lots with Valet, which is a mining company. So all of them talk about various aspects of what it's like to work with that organization and what's important to do to show a good impression and to potentially get a role there. We also have a lot of content called what we call Instagram takeovers, and we're doing a lot of these even today during COVID. So what happens is the employers take over our Instagram accounts and they tell you what it's like to work within that organization. It typically happens on Tuesdays, and we've got one coming up with Bell. We've got some other ones. This is one that we did with Rogers, and it's a great way for you to get an inside look directly from young people who actually work with that organization of what it's like to work there, why they love it, and why you should think about joining them. So we've talked a little bit about interviews. They're so important. The first part is getting the interview, and that's done through your application process, your networking, your applying for jobs, your research, and then wow, you land an interview. And so how do you prepare for that? We've got tons of information that you should do. First of all, think about who it is that you're going to be speaking to in the interview. So we've got often in a lot of our profiles of companies that we have on our website, we've got some information about the various recruiters that do campus recruitment. And if you learn more about who they are, then, it makes it much easier for you to have a conversation. And familiar faces are a lot easier to speak to. And actually, I'll tell you that from experience, because if I was in a room right now with you live, I'd feel a lot more comfortable speaking to you because I could see all your faces. But really, if you do your research in advance, you can become prepared, and you recognize the person when you go to do your interview. It's really important to do that. And we have lots of content, as I mentioned, on various interviewing tips and tricks. And often it's coming directly from the recruiters. Here's some articles that we have that feature recruiters from Bell, from the Insurance Institute. We've got specific information about doing video interviews, which is going to be so critical for you. We've got Instagram stories to tell you about how to prep for your interview. So, just follow us, and all this information is provided to you for free. Networking, we talked a little bit about that. One of the toughest skills ever, I think. But one of the things that the candidate video showcase is good at is giving you some experience about telling your story in a brief way that is conversational. And it's a great way to kind of prep yourself for that experience of when you get a chance to do it in person or even virtually. So we have a lot of event listings on our website. I pulled a page from our website so you can see some of the ones that are just coming up in the coming weeks. A lot of them are virtual, obviously, and so you can keep you can star them. You can have reminders to attend those. It's all there under your control when you're registered users. Finding a mentor is often highly recommended, and mentorship, I think, is very unique. In some ways, sometimes it happens organically. So you're in a work environment and you just have this kind of chemistry with a particular person that kind of works. Other ways you can develop mentors through mentorship programs that employers have. Take advantage of those if they're available to you. Your schools may be able to help you with setting up relationships with a potential mentor. The key thing is to understand what it is that this person can help you with. So, we've got a lot of advice about how potentially finding a mentor. Mentors are there not to give you, to provide support and give you advice and be a sounding board as you go through your transition from school to work, and as you go onward in your career. They can be extremely valuable. So we encourage young people to find those people who will help you prepare yourself in a more effective way for the expectations of the workplace, and in particular with a company. And it doesn't have to be somebody that's in your company. It could be somebody who is a teacher, who is a community in your community, who's somebody that you respect and trust. And there's many ways that you can develop those relationships, even through LinkedIn, as Perry pointed out. So we know a lot about what employers are looking for because we work with a lot of employers who have ongoing campaigns to try and recruit young people. So we learn from them what they're looking for, and we try to tell you, the job seeker, what it is they're looking for so you can make a better connection between you and your potential employer. So things have shifted away from a real skills and experience assessment. So technical skills are always important. You've got to have them. That's why you go to school and you get an education. And experience is also really important as well. But they're also looking for things that allow them to assess fit and potential within the organization. So they're looking for these things that are called vaguely soft skills, which which is a bit of a misnomer because they're so important. It sort of implies that they're not important, but they are. They're core competencies, things like judgment, reasoning, performance, attitude, leadership, drive, all these things that you should be thinking about and thinking about being able to demonstrate with examples in your CVs, because employers are really looking for those kinds of things because they know that their workplace is changing at a breakneck speed and they need people to be able to adapt and be resilient in that kind of environment. So things like, as I mentioned, these are the kinds of things that are often referred to as soft skills, but actually are, as one of our important collaborators and employer career educators, soft skills are really the critical skills. They will help you ride out the challenges that come in your career and be able to allow you to build on a foundation of these kinds of aspects of your personality that only get better with practice. But we know that the stats are huge. So LinkedIn actually did a global trends report in 2019 that talked about what's the importance of soft skills. And 92% of talent professionals reported that soft skills are equally or more important to hire for than hard skills are. And 89% said that when a new hire doesn't work out, it's often because they lack some critical soft skills. So take these seriously as really part of your toolkit that you're bringing to your job search, but also to the workplace when you actually land that job. And so experience are often things, experiential learning rather, is a way that a lot of people develop soft skills. And it's something like any skill that you can practice. But in failing that, when we're not in a position where we can actually get those, in a pandemic when we're all working from home, it's a lot more challenging. So Talent Egg worked all summer long, and we're just in production right now in launching our new sort of, we call it Talent Egg University for Soft Skills. And it's all about developing some really well thought out kind of soft skills development courses. There's going to be a set of them that we're launching in January to support you in developing these skills that are going to be available to you at your convenience virtually on our website. And are critical to helping you build your confidence and the capacity to have these soft skills so that you can actually bring them to the job when you land it. Because we started developing them during the pandemic this summer, we worked really hard at making sure that every single aspect of these courses include an in-person sort of aspect. So how do you function effectively or give a presentation within a workplace in a real situation where you're in person? And then how do you do it effectively if you're actually working virtually from home? So there's a way of being able to develop these. There's these dual sorts of parts of the soft skills on the same sort of aspects, whether it's communication or leadership or presentation. We're trying to give you both the in-person kinds of skills that you need, as well as the training that you might need if you're having to work from home. So that's coming in January 2021, so keep an eye on it. There's going to be a capacity to be able to receive a certificate of completion and a badge that you can put on your CV or include in your profile on LinkedIn or elsewhere on social media to support you in showing that you've demonstrated that you've actually you've taken this on and you put in the extra work to actually develop these soft skills that are so critical to your success within the workplace. And to that end, I wanted to, I noticed that Neil and Magdalena are here and would love to take questions from you. Should you wish to have any questions for me, I'd love to be able to respond.
And that's exactly why we popped in, is because we do have some questions and Magdalena has them organized for you.
Yes. Thanks, Mary. A wonderful presentation. And I see some students really are curious about specifics. So for example, that video showcase, so innovative. And do you have any tips on, for example, the length of such a pitch or video commercial for yourself. How long do you think this should be?
Yeah, so we actually sort of recommend that you don't do it any longer than 2 minutes. So it's really meant to allow you to be able to, in a shorthand way, show who you are and what you're passionate about, and what it is about you that's unique. And you saw some of the examples, and I wish, if we were doing this in person, I'd be able to show you some wonderful examples. And we were actually planning, as you know, to give the opportunity for students to be able to record at the event. But all of this can be done online on any device. So we do recommend that you look at some of the samples that we have, so that, and some of the tutorials to be able to do a good job. But I wouldn't go longer than 2 minutes, because it's really an introduction. And what you're trying to do is induce the employer to reach out and set up a time to chat with you, or to reach out and send you some screening questions about what they're looking for, and being able to record those answers. So yeah,
Thank you.
Brief, but be real, be genuine, and show your passion and what you're really good at.
What about soft skills? So we talked about soft skills, of course. How would you showcase them the best way possible in a resume or an application? It's not the same as being in person. Are there particular types of words or phrases? How would you do this in a verbal or in a written format?
Well, I think what you want to do is to be able to demonstrate how you might have them. So if you worked with a team, for example, or you you achieved some goal that demonstrated your capacity to in teamwork, you can mention it in a way that you can demonstrate by the activities that you've been involved in that show that you've got this particular soft skill. You can say you do, obviously, but it's really about putting it in context in what your real life has provided you in terms of being able to demonstrate them. So showing is better than telling.
Right.
And that's what all our recruiters tell us when they look at CVs, is that demonstrate, demonstrate, demonstrate. So we encourage young people to sort of think about what they've achieved, whether it's in a student association or their sports team, or volunteering, that demonstrated certain aspects, whether it's leadership, communication, teamwork, and couch it in terms that are contextual, where they can show that they actually use those skills.
Mm-hmm. Another question that's come in: for international students who don't yet have Canadian work experience, what employability skills would you highlight, or how would you do this in a resume?
Well, I think, the fact that you've worked elsewhere is often a very powerful thing to highlight. I think that being able to, the same way that you would demonstrate your work background in, if you had it in Canada, you would still tell that story about yourself and what you achieved during that time. Again, showing is better than telling, in the sense of demonstrate your achievements that you had in that job elsewhere. Don't be shy about talking about the work that you did in other countries. It's really valuable. Your international experience is hugely important for many companies who have global enterprises. One of our clients, Valet, they have a management training program where they rotate people around the world, from Brazil to Canada to the United States to all around the globe. And so your capacity to be able to work in different environments is actually something you should highlight as a strength, and don't shy away from it. It's very valuable experience.
Great. I think maybe one more. Any tips on strengths and weaknesses? We obviously want to build on strengths and focus our resume and our applications there. Is there some way that we need to address our potential weaknesses? It's very common during an interview. So to be, honest, and to be open, and to be yourself, to be authentic, how do you manage that in?
Yeah, it's one of the classic interview questions, right? Like, what's your, what are you so good at? What are you, often people, I've heard answers that are silly, things like, well, you could say that my worst characteristic is that I'm, extremely hardworking or something like that. And it's just, it makes no sense, and nobody believes it. So I think being honest and genuine is important. You don't have to volunteer that you're really, really bad at something unless, unless it's a critical part of the job that you're applying for that they're going to discover anyway. But I do think that you can, it's certainly, it's certainly appropriate for you to highlight what you're really good at, but also indicate, I may not be an expert at this particular thing, but I'm an intermediate and always ready to learn. And we've had a lot of, I showed you Susan Bednowski's resume roast, and one of the things that she loved was that somebody set out in their resume things that were what their strengths were and also what they're competent in, but maybe we're at an intermediate level, and have it set out there so that it's clear that they have the capacity to be able to learn, but they're also being honest and being real about what their qualifications are. So she thought it was really appropriate and an appealing part of a CV to actually indicate where they might be a beginner in certain aspects or skill sets.
Great. Thank you so much, Mary. I think I will pass it on to Neil.
Perfect. Thank you, Magdalena, and thank you, Mary. And I'm just going to stand up again because we are in our working transition break. But Mary, I just want to amplify two things that I thought you just addressed so fantastically. One, first, thanks for introducing many of us to a new forum, because I'm imagining that some folks didn't, and thanks for the diligence with taking us through that, and for video tips on what to do, and permission to record a few times, because not all of us are like Celine Dion, who recorded My Heart Will Go On in just one take.
Right.
So thanks for saying that. And then also, thank you for punctuating the myth that it needs to be Canadian experience. I do not think that that is a fair or just piece of feedback that people might get, and people do get. And thank you for showcasing how to focus on the skills that do come with that transition, in terms of being able to navigate different cultures, the strength of speaking different languages. Like, there are so many strengths to do that. So if anyone is feeling like you are at a deficit because you do not have quote unquote Canadian experience, listen to Mary and focus on the strengths of your story and your journey, because that is important and that matters. So Mary, thank you for saying that, and just thought it was worthy of amplification.
Absolutely. Well, I'll be honest with you. I would say that 50% of my hires for Talondag have been people that have had international experience. I really value it as an employer, and I know that a lot of the employers that I work with do as well. And it just shows and demonstrates that people are resilient. They're capable of being very brave and working in a lot of different kinds of environments. Taking their career journey across the globe is a pretty exciting and extraordinary thing, and it should be something that people are very proud of. And I'm sorry if people had negative experiences in that regard in terms of job seeking, because I think it's an important part of who they are as people, and their capacity to be able to bring so much more to the table as an employee in Canada.
Yes, exactly. And so well said. So Mary, thank you so much for lending your insights and experience and inspiration to our morning.
My pleasure.
And with that, we transition to Geeta, who is phenomenal, great energy. Again, similar to the whole theme of this morning, with a session on how to stay hired, because how to not get fired is a totally different session. And so for this final morning session. Sorry, I shouldn't laugh at my own jokes, but I did. Okay. So I would like to introduce Geeta Chopra, Retail Innovation Manager at Johnson & Johnson, a company that might be bringing us a COVID-19 vaccine. So we should especially send Johnson & Johnson and Geeta some energy and love. Geeta Chopra has over 10 years of experience with tech, innovation, and consumer insights. She leads retail innovation at Johnson & Johnson's consumer division and is responsible for shaping the future of retail through technology pilots and elevated strategic customer partnerships. She is design thinking certified and applies creative problem solving to uncover business value for both Johnson & Johnson and partners. A true coast to coast Canadian, she was originally from Winnipeg, spent the last 5 years in Toronto, and is now based out of Vancouver, BC. So I'm assuming we'll see you in the Maritimes and the Atlantic provinces.
I hope so.
Future career journeys. So during the session, you will learn about what skills are helpful to stand out as a new hire or an experienced employee, including how to self-promote, how to internally network, how to increase your visibility, and how to select a mentor or internal champion. So we'll listen to some real life tips and tricks and get a chance to learn from one another and Geeta's amazing experience in such a fantastic company. Geeta.
Thank you, Neil. Thanks, everybody. So I hope everyone did take a break. Energy is high. Zoom fatigue is real. So I do hope you got up and stretched. Grab a cup of coffee or tea. I hope you enjoy this as much as I am going to enjoy it. So give me a minute. I'm just going to share my screen and we'll get started on this really exciting topic. And honestly, a topic that I wish had been discussed more as somebody that was, once a new graduate. So as Neil mentioned, I work at Johnson & Johnson in retail innovation, which is a really cool function that focuses on the future of retail. But it's been a really interesting and nonlinear career path to get here. And so I've learned a lot of things along the way. I've also learned a lot from mentors and from peers on not only, how to survive the workplace, but how to thrive. And I wish that I had received some of these tips myself because, I learned the hard way. So I'll be sharing some stories and some examples and hopefully keep it a little interactive as well. So in the spirit of interaction, before we even get into the content, let's start with a Zoom poll. So I will ask Michael, our IT lead, to put up the poll. So you should see a poll in front of you now. What do you think it takes to stay hired? And you can select multiple options. So do you think it takes resiliency, flexibility, hard work, authenticity, self-promotion, continuous learning, or problem solving? Take a second and select what you think it takes to stay hired. And let's see what the results of that are in a couple moments. Curious to know which skill comes to the forefront there. I do see in the chat, someone says, I would say all. Yes, the answer, it's a bit of a trick question. It is actually all of those things. And so because there's so many elements of what it takes to stay hired, I'll be speaking to a couple that I think, are really key. But also in a few moments, I'll also be asking you guys to share what you guys think it takes to stay hired. So like I mentioned, I'm going to chat through, not only surviving the workplace, but thriving. And I think driving home the idea that, the work doesn't stop once you get hired. I know we focus so much on interview skills and resumes, but even after you land the job and it's your first day and you're sitting in that desk, there's a lot that goes into maintaining kind of your leadership and building your brand within an organization. So let's take a little bit, kind of a reintroduction to me. I remember as a student, I always loved hearing the backgrounds of certain speakers. You always kind of want to know, how'd you get to where you are? So I want to share my nonlinear career path. I was born and raised in Winnipeg, as Neil mentioned. I went to the University of Manitoba. I studied marketing in my undergrad, and then 5 years later, I returned to get my MBA. After graduation of my undergrad, I worked in advertising, actually. So I worked for a number of years at an ad agency called ThinkShift that actually focused on agriculture. That's why it says ag agency. And I learned everything there is to know about agriculture marketing, which I did not expect when I was a student, and learned a ton. From there, I did my MBA and moved to Toronto, where I knew no one, and sort of had to rebuild my network. And my professor hired me actually to work at a technology company called Beartech. Following that was really where I was able to build an identity for myself in Toronto and landed a role at Procter & Gamble in sales, learning a lot about retail and about sales and just what it's like to work for a really big company. And then after P&G, I did sort of shift to Johnson & Johnson, where I am now. But during my time at P&G, I actually did some online schoolwork through an online platform called IDEO, where I got certified in design thinking. And I always like to mention that because, again, you know, learning happens throughout your career. And it was really that certification that helped me get this job that I'm in now. Other things, I love soccer. I miss playing soccer this year. That's a picture of me and my dog and my husband. My favorite book is Change by Design. I highly recommend it. It's a wonderful kind of lesson in thinking differently. And of course, I cheer for the Winnipeg Jets, which is funny because my husband does not, and it makes for a really fun hockey season in this household. So without further ado, let's get into it. What does it take to stay hired? You know, like I said, there's a lot of tips and tricks that I could walk you through, but I'm just going to take you through a couple. So the first sort of lesson that I learned, it's going to sound so simple, but it really is the bedrock. It's the foundation. Do good work. And when I say that, you know, I think that when we are hired, we assume that we should just do, you know, exactly what we're told. But what I would say is spend time thinking about the problem that you're being asked to solve, and spend time thinking about if it could be solved in a different way. That's a way of doing really good work, is questioning, well, could I do this differently? Could I enhance this somehow? And that feeds into the next point, don't settle. I think that, again, when you're new, you get sort of nervous and you just kind of want to output maybe quickly or be efficient. But really consider, are you proud of the work you're submitting? Are you proud of the email that you just quickly wrote? Are you proud of the PowerPoint that you really quickly put together? And don't settle if you're not. Really make sure that everything that you output has your stamp on it and you're proud of. And I'll share a story here about that. So when I was new in my role in advertising, I was given a very established client, so a client that we'd had for over 10 years. And when I met with the client, they said, you know, Gita, I want to do something really different this year. I've run a really fresh campaign. And so I took that back to the design team and I shared the client's wishes. And a week or two later, the design team came back with their campaign idea. And I was disappointed when I first saw it. I knew that it was not what the client asked for, but I wasn't sure if I should say anything. Again, I was very new. These were designers much more senior than me. But, you know, I thought to myself, well, my job is to represent the client and make them happy. So how can I share feedback in a really constructive way? And so I sort of took the client's words back to the designers and I said, hey guys, listen, I don't feel like this is going to be what the client asked for. They asked for something different and fresh, and this feels really similar. And I brought up evidence of things we'd done last year and the year before. And in that way, it became objective. It wasn't personal. And the designers agreed. And they were like, you know what, Gita, you're right. We could do a stronger job at this. They took it back. A couple of days later, we presented a new idea to the client, and they were so thrilled. And so it's just an example of having a little bit of courage, operating with tact, but also making sure that, you know, I didn't settle and that I was proud of the work that we were outputting back to the client. And then finally, you know, as you're doing great work, Learn how to speak to it with passion. So if you create a new template, or if you got some good feedback about some work you did, I know this isn't comfortable for everyone. Self-promotion is still something I'm working on, but find a way to share it back. So, in that example, I did share back to the entire organization how happy the client was. And that was a team effort. And it was great because it reinforced this idea of never settle, which, I think is really, really great. Another tip on how to stay hired. I think this is a really, really good one. And I've spoken to a number of colleagues who agree. What you lack in expertise, make up in enthusiasm. So, when you're first hired, no one is going to expect you to be the expert. And in fact, it could land pretty poorly if you act like the expert. And I think many of us, again, want to show up as our best selves and assume that we need to be leaders in every scenario, but that's not necessarily the case. And I'll, again, share an example. So when I started working in advertising, I just assumed that I was hired because of my brilliance, of course, and that I was expected to lead every meeting. And I wanted to make sure people knew who I was. So I remember after a particular client meeting where I had spoken up quite a bit, my manager pulled me aside and said, Keita, for the next couple meetings, I'd like you to practice active listening, which was his gentle way of saying, hey, you don't need to speak up if you aren't the expert. It's okay to actively listen, to scribe, to ask really pertinent questions, but not necessarily kind of pretend like, you're the boss. And I really took that to heart, and it really did improve my relationships with my clients as well as internally. So when you're new, I would suggest, what you lack for in expertise, make up with enthusiasm. And what does enthusiasm look like? It could be just generally bringing energy to a room. It could be, again, actively listening and taking amazing notes. If you're the person that's scribing in a meeting and you send amazing detailed notes after, you're valued. And that shows such enthusiasm. And things like, writing down terms that you're not familiar with, or roles or people that you've just met. That also shows that you're very enthusiastic about learning, especially if you kind of take it upon yourself to teach yourself what those terms mean, or who that person is in that role. So that's an example of enthusiasm making up for maybe expertise, which you will build, but it just takes time. The next lesson within, how to stay hired, and this is a really interesting one, is stay flexible. I think, when we first land a job, we're so excited about the role, and, we've memorized that job description. So we have an idea of what it is that job is meant to do and what you'll be doing on a day-to-day. But I think it's important to know that just like anything, your role might be a little different to what you expected, and you might need to flex. So if somebody asks you to do something that isn't in your job description, I'd say, especially as a new person, again, approach it with enthusiasm and say, sure, happy to do that. How can I help? What can I do to make this better? Is this something that you need from me on a regular basis? Is this something that I can make easier for you? Can I template this, or can I make this, an Excel calculator versus you having to manually do it? I think putting up your hand really does show flexibility and leadership qualities, even if it's something that you're not necessarily, meant to do within your role. And I'll tell you a story. So when I was again back in advertising, because these are my first out of university stories, I was responsible for building a trade show booth. So for one of our clients, there was a big trade show in I think it was Vegas, and they needed a huge booth design. And so I project managed everything about that. That was my job. So I ordered all the material. I made sure it shipped on time. I made sure the design and the branding was right. And when I got to Vegas the day before the show, I was really just there as an observer, but I walked up to my client's booth and something just didn't feel quite right. Something was missing. And I couldn't stand it. And I made a mad dash to Bed Bath & Beyond. And I picked up pillows, I picked up candles, I picked up fake plants, anything that could help spruce up the sort of booth experience. And I went back to that trade show facility, hands and knees. I was rebuilding that experience, redesigning it, because I really wanted to put in the work because my name was on it, and I wanted to be proud of it. And, you know, it was something that was not in my job description to go shopping for material or for rebuilding the booth or for kind of doing the hard labor, but I did it. And the client was super grateful. The team was grateful. The booth itself did really well. And I think that's just an example of kind of going beyond the job description and showing a bit of flexibility. I will also say, because I want to be transparent, that sometimes might mean working extended hours. And I don't want to encourage it, because I think especially in this day and age, we need to sort of protect our work-life balance. But I'll be honest, you know, in advertising, when we had a big campaign coming up, we often did kind of flex our hours in order to ensure that we all were producing like the best quality output, and then we're putting in everything we could. And, you know, we made up the time with some days off in the future, or time off. But in that moment when the team really needed me, I did step up and I did flex my hours just to kind of deliver that output with pride. So that's just some examples of staying really flexible when you're new, or even established in your role. This one's a really interesting one, and I'm so curious to know what you guys think about this one. So staying visible is something that's so important as a new hire, but even more so now in the digital world. And there are some really practical tips that I've heard and that I've seen work really well. So the first is curate your Zoom background. Now, I don't necessarily mean just your virtual background. Put whatever kind of is a good conversation starter behind you on your wall. You guys, you know, heard Perry when we were first chatting about his kind of vanity wall and his picture. It was such a great icebreaker, right? People start wanting to chat with him about that. So I have actually had colleagues that have redesigned their office to have pictures of their kids behind them, medals, maybe pictures of their pets, some beautiful plants, because it honestly really does help, especially as someone new, give someone else an excuse to start chatting with you. Oh, what are those medals about? Or, oh, that's a great family photo. What trip are you taking there? It does wonders. So I highly encourage you to think about like what's behind you. And then as well, your virtual background. I would be so bold as to say, when you are new and you are in a sea of Hollywood squares, why not create a custom Zoom background that says new hire, or 4 weeks old with the company, or please say hi, love to get to know you, I'm new. I would do that if I was a new hire in this environment, because visibility is so important. And I have met new hires at Johnson & Johnson that I unfortunately forget are new. And, you know, if it was an office environment, I could walk by their desk, I could ask them how they were doing. Their visibility would sort of jog my memory of, oh, you know, you only started a month ago. How is it all going? But virtually, it is unfortunate, but it is harder to distinguish sort of the newer hires. And so doing something bold on your Zoom background to say, hey, I'm new, I think is great, and would really help some of the other people on the call reach out, connect with you, see how you're doing, check in, make sure you're doing well. So those are some tips. Another tip is introduce yourself to other new hires. So not every company has a new hire network, some do, but if yours doesn't, you don't have to be new by yourself. Often other departments are hiring as well, and maybe it's someone in supply chain or someone in finance that's new. And what I would do is I would reach out to the HR manager of your company and ask, hey, are there any other new hires that have been hired in the past month? And they would happily provide you that list. And then you can take it upon yourself to introduce yourself to them. In my role at P&G, that's what I did. I was new. I didn't know anyone else that was new. And so I asked HR, hey, can you put me in touch with some other new hires? And they were in completely different functions. But what we did was we called it our class, like class of 2008. We were the new hires of this year. And we met monthly. And it was so nice to have other new people to ask really simple things like, hey, how do you submit an expense report? Or, hey, did you get that email? What was that all about? Or, hey, where do you save your files? Or even, how do you manage your email? These are questions that you can ask other new hires, and it is so great because honestly, it kind of helps you speed up your learning curve. It also just really does great things for morale, and it creates a network that you really stay connected with throughout your career. I still keep in touch with my class from P&G, and we've all kind of done different things since then. There is really something to be said about sharing a common experience, and being new is a very common experience that really binds you. And then finally, although I did just say, active listening is a good skill, I think when and if the moment calls for it, like, for example, a roundtable or a best practices meeting, speak up. I think that we are often hungry to hear from new hires because you bring fresh eyes. So if you can say something like, in school, we used this platform, or we used this technology and it worked really well. Or in a group project, we actually used Slack and it was a great service. Those are the kinds of inputs and insights that are so valuable. And I encourage you to speak up in those moments. And also find out what types of community groups exist within your organization. At J&J, we call them employee resource groups. So it's sort of the women's network. There's an open and out community. There's a community for sort of the Asian employees of J&J. Find out what those groups exist. It might not be easy at first, to be honest. Sometimes they're a little bit harder to find, or they're not as promoted as you'd like as some of the other things. But find out about those groups, and I definitely encourage you to join them once you're hired, and you kind of have a sense of your role and kind of what you're doing. At that point, I definitely encourage you to connect with those groups. Moving right along. Okay, we heard some things about networking, both from Perry and Mary. So this, I don't think, will be a new topic. However, I do want to give you guys some really practical tips on how to network. I think that we always assume that networking has to happen like outside of our organization, but for a company like J&J, we're a global organization. There is so much networking that I can just do within the company. So I would encourage first to sort of network internally, especially as a new hire. So here's tip number 1. When you are hired, find the org chart. The org chart is essentially the organizational structure chart that maps out everyone's role and the hierarchy. Usually it's saved digitally somewhere, or you can ask HR for an up-to-date org chart, but definitely ask. At which point you can then understand kind of who are in leadership positions. It's important to know because, again, they are key influencers in the company, but also it gives you a sense of who else is doing your role. Maybe there's someone else in a different market or maybe in a different function that you could reach out to and learn from. But also it's good to kind of know who could potentially help you. So is there someone that's a little bit more senior than you that isn't your manager that you could connect with and they can show you the ropes a little bit? So that is tip number 1. Find the org chart and set up some coffee chats with people that you'd like to be introduced to, as well as leaders. If you don't have a buddy when you're first hired, sometimes companies give you a bit of like a new buddy. Form your own, like I just said, by finding someone in the org chart that you think you could learn from. And honestly, an org chart can also help you determine what you don't know. Maybe there are some roles in the company that, I remember once reading like someone was a futurist. And I was like, what is that? And I asked them for coffee to say, what do you do in the company? I'd love to know. I'm new and I'm just trying to figure out kind of how the company operates, and it would be so helpful. And it also really does kind of drive some engagement and interest into like what else exists outside of just your bubble. This is another really good tip that, again, it takes a bit of courage, but I highly encourage you to shadow individuals. So to shadow someone means to kind of follow them throughout their day for the purpose of learning. So I highly encourage you to shadow an individual that is maybe someone that you is a bit senior to you, or maybe that it does your job, but you just kind of want to see what they do in a day. It's also really cool because you can kind of see what meetings they attend, or even kind of their work culture. So when they take breaks or how they answer phone calls, all that stuff is really amazing. Excuse me, my dog is scratching at the door. Classic. Give me 1 second here. The new normal is getting interrupted by your dog. Okay, and then final tip around networking internally. If I were to leave you with anything, if there's anything you remember from this conversation, it's this: always ask, how can I help? Any new hire that I have met that after meeting me asks me, how can I help? It is such a game changer. It is so well received. It is what every manager wants to hear. And it just shows such empathy as well as passion and enthusiasm. So after you meet someone, remember that it's a two-way street. You're not just sort of using them for their intel and wisdom, but you're also offering up something. And so at any point when you are a new hire and you meet someone or you do something, remember to ask, how can I help? And a quick story here. So when I got hired in this role, which is 2 years ago, I did not look at the org chart, which is why I highly encourage it. And I knew I should have, and I didn't. And it was my second day on the job, and there was a big all-company meeting. And so there's about 300 people in this big room. And I'm kind of being introduced to a number of individuals, and there was someone that looked fairly young. And so again, I shouldn't have assumed, but I assumed that maybe he was a bit junior. And so I said, "Oh, hi, what's your name?" He tells me his name, and I go, "Oh, what do you do?" And he goes, "Oh, well, I'm the senior VP, the senior vice president." And I was so embarrassed because, when you're hired in a new company, those titles should be titles of that names that but faces that too. So the president, the CEO, the vice president, those are people that you want to be able to recognize if you're in an elevator or in a room. And so I was so embarrassed, and I did say, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry," and he was fine. But I want to share that it's really important not only to know titles but faces as well when you look at that org chart. And second last here, this one I'm really passionate about. And guys, I think that especially as new hires, this one can get lost a little bit because, again, we're just trying to follow the rules and trying to do a good job. But something I would encourage you to do from the moment that you are hired is to train yourself. So often when you're hired, there's sort of this corporate training that you go through, and it covers a number of topics. But one, that can be very broad. It can sort of be all company training, not necessarily to your specific role. And two, it can kind of take a long time. Sometimes the training happens a month or 2 months or a couple months after, kind of on a rotation. So don't wait to be trained. Train yourself. That could mean looking internally at resources. Often there's pre-recorded training that you can take. Ask your manager, "Hey, what are some really great trainings I should take right away?" Whether it's like financial acumen within the company or negotiating. There might be some skills that he's like, take these trainings, they're available online, but definitely ask. As well, make sure that you are kind of upskilling yourself in your industry. I encourage you to set Google alerts. Again, this is like a really tangible tip that nobody told me, but someone, I think a mentor shared with me. When you're hired, highly encourage you to set up Google alerts. The way you do that is you go to google.com/alert and you type in terms that you want to get news articles about. So for example, in my current role, I'm Retail Innovation Manager. When I first got hired, I set up a Google alert for retail innovation because I thought, hey, that's a really interesting topic. And I want to be aware of all of the news that's coming, being published about retail innovation. And I still get those daily updates, and it's still valuable. I share some of those articles. It also helps me, be kind of really up to date with what's going on in the industry, but also I can share kind of thought leadership to my manager and to my colleagues, which makes me feel really proud. So highly encourage doing something like setting up a Google alert for your company or for your industry or for your role, and set a couple hours every week to read. There's some great articles on LinkedIn. There's some great news articles. Kind of just stay informed. And follow key influencers in the industry if that's kind of a easier approach. You can find them often on Instagram or on Twitter. Again, it helps you kind of stay engaged and is a way of training yourself on the topic. So really encourage that as kind of a way to stay on trend, but also really trained up and upskilled. And then finally, I think the last piece of advice that I would give before I turn it over to you guys is on the topic of mentorship, which again, Mary did a great job of speaking about mentorship. But, especially when I was a student, I thought, well, how do you get one? And what do you say? And it's not comfortable for everybody. So the first tip I'd give is make sure it's organic. Find a mentor when you're ready to have one. When you do have thoughtful questions and thoughtful retrospective or reflection on your own career. When it's right for you to seek a mentor. Don't just do it because you've been told it's a good thing to have. I really encourage you to seek mentors outside of your organization. So although I encourage networking internally, a mentor, I really encourage external to your organization, because it should be someone that you can speak freely with outside of workplace politics or outside of kind of tiptoeing around people's feelings. You want to be able to speak freely because, for example, you might want to speak to a mentor about potentially considering a career change, or how to negotiate a salary increase, or how to deal with a really tough customer or client. Those are things that you might feel more comfortable speaking to someone that's not within the organization. But how to find a mentor? Again, I really do encourage it to kind of happen organically with someone you have natural chemistry with, but there are forums that really facilitate it. There are apps. So if you're curious, if you're more tech savvy, there's an app called Lunch Club, which you might want to look at. It's a great connecting. It essentially connects you with people with similar interests. Another one is called 10,000 Coffees. And you know what? Your college might actually have access to some of these programs as well. So seek that out. You can also use LinkedIn, Eventbrite, or networking meetups are great. I'll share a personal story. When I first moved to Toronto, like I mentioned, I knew no one. Like I did not know a single person. I moved out for career ambitions. And like I said, my professor hired me. So if you count him, I knew one person. So I remember actually Googling women in business meetup, and often free meetup because I just had a job and I couldn't afford the huge membership fees. And there were so many amazing opportunities that existed. I ended up going to an event called Lean In, which was a networking event. And that is actually where I met my current mentor. And that was 5 years ago. And we have stayed connected since. And it did take work, right? Like I had to make sure that I got her contact info. I followed up with her right after we connected. And I made sure to manage reconnections. So I would own, okay, I'd like to connect in a few months. Is that okay? I'll put something in our calendar. And when I did connect with her, I'd always have, it doesn't have to be formal. It can just be a conversation, but I'd always have something that I was seeking to learn from her, a question at least. To ask her, to make sure that the time was spent intentionally. And then finally, if you're reading articles about your industry and you learn that there are some heavyweights, let's say there's someone that publishes regularly on LinkedIn on the topic, or maybe there's someone that spoke at a TED conference, or maybe there's someone that's a keynote speaker. I encourage you to reach out to them and say, and obviously kind of say why, but say something like, hey, I'm new in the industry. You are an expert. I would love to learn more about it from you. Would you be willing to connect with me for a 20-minute chat. If they have the time to read the message, honestly, I am sure that they would at least respond, if not say, yes, happy to. So that's my kind of advice on mentorship. But I've been talking for a lot, and I realize it's kind of nearing the end of the session. Energy might be low, so let's change up the dialogue a little bit. I encourage you for the next 5 minutes, use the chat and let's share with one another some tips. So are there any tips that you would encourage on how to stay hired or excel at work? And this could be something that you've actually personally experienced or something that you've been told from a teacher or a manager or a mentor. So please share your tips. I am going to open my chat, so I have it open here. I see Magdalena. Hello. Okay. All right. Career Services offers 10,000 coffees for Centennial students and alumni. Amazing. GCEI offers mentorship program for Black identified students. That is amazing. Any other tips that you have, of things that have worked for you or something that you'd encourage? Put your name on your work and don't be shy. Take credit so you don't get lost. That is an amazing tip. What a great tip. Yes. Often, things like PowerPoint slides get forwarded often, to different audiences. And so if you build a really great deck or a really great presentation, put your name on it, PDF it maybe, so it won't get changed, and make sure you take credit. That is a great tip. Anything else, guys? Any other tips? Repeat the apps to find a mentor. Yes. Lunch Club is one app. It's all one word, Lunch Club. And then 10,000 coffees, which is available to Centennial students, I just learned. Here's another one. Oh, this is more of a comment. Don't be afraid to reach out and let others know your thoughts. Yeah, this one is a bit of a soft skill, like Mary mentioned, and I think it always has to be done with tact. You want to make sure you're not hurting someone's feelings or criticizing someone's work, but be open to sharing your thoughts. And a great tip for that I will share is make it objective. So rather than saying I don't like that, I think we could do better, try to ground it in something objective, like the brief mentioned this. I don't know if that hits the brief, or the client asked for this. Is this really matching the client request? Or our goal is to be agile. Is this really an agile approach? And in that way, you remove the personal bias as well as the sort of emotions attached and make it a little bit more objective, which is great. Smile often. I love that. Yes. Especially in days like we're having the past week, month, year, smile goes a long way. A smile, and again, how can I help? It really does go a long way. Another one, something valuable is to listen and observe. It's so true. I think that culturally, in sort of the West, we get uncomfortable when there's silence, or we get uncomfortable when we're not talking. I think we associate leadership with talking, which is not the case. Good leaders listen first. A great tip I got from my manager when I was in advertising was, Gita, a good client meeting is where you talk the least. And that was so eye-opening, because he said that means the client, one, trusts you, and two, is sharing, and you are learning how to best meet their needs. So a good meeting might be when you talk the least. Be flexible, absolutely. Practice reflection. Who am I? Who am I? Oh, I just missed it. There we go. What are my strengths? How do I show up? I love that. Yes, and that might take some learn by doing to really know what your strengths are, is when you kind of apply and go, oh, that wasn't for me, or oh, that was tougher than I thought. That's kind of when you really learn. So reflect as you go, I think, is great. It's not just about generating contacts or relationships, but also watering that little plant. It's so true. I should mention, with my mentor, I made sure to send her a topical article about her industry or mine, or shared industry, usually like once a month. And again, it wasn't just robotic. It was when I genuinely thought she would appreciate it. And I would say, hey, I thought of you. here's a really interesting article. And 9 times out of 10, she would respond with a thank you. And that would often lead to a reconnect. Here's another great one. Track your achievements and share when it's proper to do so, or just have in case you want to get support to get hired. Yeah, that's a great one. You know what? We don't talk enough about tracking achievements, and I wish there were better tools, to be honest. I have a Word doc, and you know, I use it both for tracking achievements, but also honestly, it's a bit of a self-esteem boost when I have a really hard day. I do track not only achievements, but sometimes I like copy and paste nice things people say. Like if I get a really nice compliment in an email, I save it. And I look back on it when I'm having a tough day. Those things really do help. And you're so right. We sometimes forget all the things we do in a year. And by the time our performance review comes, we can sometimes even forget. So tracking achievements in whatever way that works for you, if it's even as simple as a Word doc, it's great. So many great tips. I don't know how I'm doing for time. So I think I might turn it to questions, Magdalena,
Yes.
but reflect on these amazing tips. Thank you all for sharing so much. And I'll just maybe close with my wrap-up slide and my contact info. Here's some, again, recap of my tips. And if you'd like to connect on LinkedIn, please do. But as Perry mentioned, please mention this talk so I have some context. Thank you so much.
So, Gita, we got a few really good questions in the Q&A. You represent a really big company. So I think a lot of students, new graduates, really wonder how to break into a company like this. And I think this links nicely with what Perry was saying, you know, with LinkedIn being such a powerful tool. What and how are big companies such as yours looking for in graduates? Is there some particular channel of communication, of pitching yourself, marking yourself out there so that you get noticed as the right kind of candidate, not just a candidate, because there are so many, but the right one?
That is such a good question. And I'll share the first thing I will tell everyone is be persistent. It is hard to break into these big companies. I'm not going to lie. Be persistent. So don't give up on your first try. If you apply and you don't get a call back, keep applying. It's also a misnomer to believe that if you apply to multiple roles, it looks like you're not, you know, loyal or that you don't know. Apply to the roles that you think are of interest or that you have skills for. And if that means multiple, do it. I will say a couple things. So the first is larger companies like Johnson & Johnson and Procter & Gamble do hire a majority of their new hires off of on-campus recruitment, which means they do have a bit of a campus recruitment strategy. And unfortunately, and this is probably going to change virtually, but when we were all physically kind of within the office, it was location based. So it was a number of Toronto schools and I think 1 or 2 schools from both Quebec and BC. So that's a big portion of where they seek their new hires. It's kind of a pre-existing model of on-campus recruitment. The other way is through LinkedIn. So I should mention, I got my role here through LinkedIn. However, I did have a reference, and it was someone that kind of was within the consumer packaged goods space that referred me. And as Perry mentioned, that does give you a leg up. So if you are trying to get into a large organization, one, follow them on LinkedIn. Set up alerts on their talent portals. Every large company has one. You can just Google J&J Talent Portal or P&G Talent Portal and it will come up. You can set up alerts for jobs that are suited to your skills. Find a natural way that you can connect with someone in the company. Like I said, references really do help. So if there's any way that you can connect to the company before applying, definitely do so. And then finally, always elevate when you were a leader. So I will say within all the big organizations, and I've been on the interviewing side, we seek moments of leadership. So whether that's leader in your church, leader in your sport, team captain, leader of your school group, leader of a project at school, leader of your faith community, whatever that looks like, really elevate that in your resume as well as in your interviews, because that's what we look for.
Thank you, Gita. Maybe one more question and then we'll move to Neil for some closing comments. When you don't know about the marketing or consumer goods industry in Canada because you're an international student or you're just a new graduate, you're not broken in yet, how do you get started in this particular area? Do you have any advice that's sector specific, area specific?
Like how to kind of break into a new industry?
Right.
Yeah, great question again. I think that the first thing you do is kind of educate yourself about it. I know it's so hard sometimes to fully understand an industry unless you're in it, but try your best. So whether that means like following influencers in the industry, and again, Google is amazing. If you Google like influencer in telecom or key, influencer in CPG, often it's people like editors in publications. It's often journalists. It's often thought leaders or like professional speakers. Follow them on LinkedIn, follow them on Instagram, follow them on Twitter. That'll just give you a sense of like topics of interest, kind of things they often retweet things that you should read or things that you should follow. So that just gives you like a bit of like an education. And I guess the second would be try your best to get face time with people within that industry. So if that looks like attending a meetup or attending a networking event or scheduling like a Zoom coffee, highly recommend it. And again, it takes persistence. It might not happen on your first try. Someone on LinkedIn might not respond, but if you curate your message and say, hi, I'm a new hire, or I'm a student, I'm looking to learn more about blank, I can tell you every peer that I know responds to students. It's kind of a leg up, an advantage you have. We are always seeking to support students. So use that to your advantage. Kind of, you appear non-threatening when you're a student and you just want to learn. And so we are always willing to support. So I guess, yeah, educate yourself, follow and sort of keep FaceTime and be persistent. That's kind of the magic. And there's always a dash of luck when it comes to breaking into a new industry.
Thanks so much, Gita. We'll pass it over to Neil.
Gita, thank you so much. And you have this wonderful way of conveying these complex pieces in just such a simple and relational way that is authentic and inspiring. So thank you for sharing those pieces of advice with us, because they're all so fantastic. And thanks so much in particular for taking that view of someone new, because when you're new, you're like that territory feels a little bit icky when you're in transition, and to just normalize that and provide some tangible, very concrete tips was just so appreciated. So thank you.
Thank you.
And I think, and I'm hoping that what we all got around the quote unquote table here, I'm just saying table because I'm at a table, but around the screen here, is really that it's a community effort. Like co-shaping the workforce isn't on any single individual or any single body, but the village of us that come together. Programs, academic programs, informal or formal, have a responsibility in terms of discipline-specific knowledge and competencies, but also the essential or soft skills that are really valued in the workplace. The workplace folks have a responsibility as well. And you've seen this through three great people today who have offered their services and expertise, not just in this forum, but outside through additional and ongoing connection. And applicants have a responsibility as well. And there are so many elements that were highlighted that are in our direct control as applicants, from how we search for jobs and how we engage with people to how we share our stories. So it truly, truly is a co-shaping in terms of the workplace that we are all in together. And what was fantastic was both Perry and Mary indicated that there are jobs out there. Perry shared a whole list of industries that are hiring. Mary gave an indication of the volume. And so, I hope that anchors with hope, that despite COVID and despite the disruption and despite the narrative that the economy may or may not be healthy, there are jobs there. which kind of brings us to the second piece that I took from our presenters is the aspect of experience, and that the experience that we have, all experience is valuable experience, whether it be in volunteer work, whether it be outside of your academic discipline, and whether it be outside of Canada, experience is valuable. And it's valuable because that experience provides us with the essential skills that folks are looking for. So Perry talked, and we saw this notably with respect to analysis and people interaction. Gita talked about some amazing skills, and folks mentioned this in the chat as well, in terms of listening, flexibility, and building relationships. And Mary's piece around telling your unique story, really rephrasing it from that competitive kind of make sure that you do X, Y, and Z to you have strengths, be yourself, and share your unique story. And that is fantastic. And the other punctuated point with experience is to demonstrate, demonstrate, demonstrate. So name it and then show how that is there. And so thank you for that. The third piece that I got was with respect to networking, and whether we call it networking or whether we call it community building or whether we call it just sort of relationally engaging, that piece being so important. And folks rightly brought up in the chat the question around, well, how do we do this if we may not have access to some of the other tools that other people have, like our parents and the social capital, particularly if we're in from a family of immigrants and who are new to the country. And that was a great question, and I really enjoyed the fact that someone brought that forward. And really, what we heard from our speakers was it really is about relations, because we are relational beings. So engage with the intention of uplifting others and uplifting communities, and it's that meaningful and genuine engagement, regardless of the term that we use, that is important. And as we think about indigenization, it really is deep in that relational obligations that we have for each other's learning, for each other's development, and really to help better each other and communities and the environment. Which also, for me, getting to the third piece, and Magdalena will probably close us with this, is leadership as an essential skill, and how leadership is truly an essential skill. And if we think about leadership as engaged citizenship, I think it just all comes together. And then the last thing that I got from our folks is that the journey is not linear. The journey is circular. The journey is a little messed up, and we may have everything in sequence, but we may not be in that dream job. And maybe that dream job is a myth, but all of those experiences bring us valuable experiences to translate to the workforce. And the focal point of always making sure that we're aligned with our strengths, interests, values, and beliefs, because that will permeate whichever role we are in. So thank you, because there was a lot of rich content from our presenters, panelists, and over to Magdalena to close us out.
Thank you so much, Neil. Thanks so much. You, as always, have led us with a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of energy. Thank you for attending this event. So before we leave, I'd like everyone to take a moment and participate in a couple of very short polls, just 2 questions. Speaking of those skills, we want to make sure we understand what you'd like to practice and what was most valuable to you during today's session. So here's the first poll. Please let us know what skills you think are most valuable for you to practice and develop throughout your career journey. Show us, please. Let us know. We want to support you, and we need to know this from you. Very good. Thank you. See some patterns emerging. Wonderful. Now, the second poll. Future sessions. Would you be interested in participating in future sessions to practice things that we've talked about today? So actually have participants in the room in breakouts if we continue being virtual, and just actually record each other and pitch and practice and talk. Yes, good, wonderful answers. Thanks so much. Thank you everyone again for your feedback. On behalf of the organizing committee for this event and Centennial College's Career Week, I'd like to thank you all again. It's wonderful to see you here. It's been a pleasure these last 3 hours, and I look forward to seeing you again at the Centennial Leadership Academy with Career Services and on our virtual campus. Thanks so much.